The headlights cut through the falling snow like a blade through darkness. William Harrison stopped his car before the strangest sight he'd ever encountered. A woman in a white wedding dress walking along the roadside, high heels dangling from her fingers, her hair damp and disheveled. The expensive gown was torn at the hem, dragging across the asphalt. Normally, Will would have driven past without stopping. He'd learned to avoid interfering in other people's lives, but something about the way she walked as if she were trying to escape from herself made him pause. He rolled down his window. Do you need help? Hit that like button if you've ever made a split-second decision that changed everything. Will had been driving home from Charlie's parent-teacher conference, his mind still processing Mrs. Peterson's gentle concerns about his 8-year-old daughter's withdrawn behavior. The roads through Greenwich were familiar, winding past colonial estates and bare oak trees that would bloom magnificently in spring. He'd taken this route countless times since moving to Connecticut, but tonight felt different. The snow was heavier than the weather report had predicted, and the woman in the wedding dress seemed to materialize from the storm itself. She looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of defiance and desperation. Even in the dim glow of his headlights, he could see she was beautiful in that polished way that spoke of expensive salons and careful breeding. But there was something raw beneath the surface, something that reminded him of looking in the mirror after Sarah's funeral. I'm fine, she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of someone who'd attended private schools and country clubs. Just taking a walk. Will shifted his car into park. In a wedding dress in a snowstorm on Route 9, a small smile flickered across her face before disappearing. When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic. He studied her for a moment, noting the way she held herself with careful composure despite the obvious distress. Look, I don't know what happened tonight, but you're going to freeze to death out here. No judgment, no questions, just a warm car and a destination of your choice. She hesitated, glancing back down the road, as if expecting someone to follow. Her wedding dress, which probably cost more than his car, was soaked through at the bottom. The delicate beadwork caught the light like captured stars. I don't actually have a destination, she admitted quietly. Will reached across and opened the passenger door. Sometimes that's the best kind of journey. Victoria Ashford, though she wouldn't tell him her name for another hour, slid into the passenger seat with the careful grace of someone accustomed to being watched. She pulled the seatbelt across the voluminous skirt, creating an almost comical contrast between the mundane safety measure and the fairy tale gown. I'm Will, he said, pulling back onto the road. Tori, she replied after a pause. And thank you. They drove in silence for several miles, the only sound the soft whisper of snow against the windshield and the gentle hum of the heater. Will found himself stealing glances at her profile, trying to piece together the story. A wedding dress this elaborate didn't come from impulse shopping. The way she carried herself suggested old money, real wealth. But there was something fragile about her composure, like ice that might crack under pressure. Are you cold? He asked, noticing her slight shiver. A little. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a worn wool blanket, one of Charlie's many comfort items that had migrated to his car over the years. Here, it's not much, but it's warm. Tori accepted the blanket with a grateful nod, wrapping it around her shoulders. The contrast was striking. Expensive silk and lace covered by a child's security blanket with faded cartoon characters. She noticed his glance and smiled ruefully. I suppose I look ridiculous. You look like someone who's having the worst night of her life, Will said honestly. And that's okay. We all have those nights. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. You sound like you speak from experience, don't we all? They had reached the outskirts of town where the grand estates gave way to more modest homes. Will realized he'd been driving aimlessly, reluctant to end this strange encounter. His house was just a few miles away, a colonial revival that Sarah had fallen in love with during their house hunting expedition 8 years ago. It was too big for just him and Charlie now, but he couldn't bring himself to sell it. Where would you like me to take you? He asked. Tori was quiet for a long moment. I don't have anywhere to go, she said finally. My apartment, my old apartment. I gave it up when I moved in with. She gestured vaguely at her dress. And I can't go to my parents. They're the reason I'm wearing this thing in the first place. Will made a decision that surprised him. I have a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm and private. You can figure out your next move in the morning. You don't know me, she protested. I could be anyone. You could be, he agreed, but you're not. You're someone who's lost right now, and I remember what that feels like. As they pulled into his driveway, Will felt a flutter of nervousness. He hadn't brought a woman home since Sarah died. The house still felt like a shrine to his late wife filled with her choices and memories. But something about Tori's situation bypassed his usual defenses. The house was dark except for the porch light he'd left on for Charlie, who was spending the night at her best friend's house. Will was grateful for the timing. This situation was complicated enough without trying to explain a stranger in a wedding dress to his 8-year-old daughter. "Welcome to our humble home," he said, unlocking the front door. Tori stepped inside her heels, clicking on the hardwood floor. The interior was warm and lived in with family photos scattered on side tables and Charlie's artwork decorating the refrigerator. It was the kind of home that felt like a hug, the opposite of the sterile perfection she'd been living in for the past year. "You have a beautiful home," she said, meaning it. "My wife chose most of it," Will replied, then caught himself. "My late wife. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." Coffee, I was going to make some anyway. While Will busied himself in the kitchen, Tori wandered around the living room studying the family photos. She could see the progression of years, a young couple's wedding photo, pregnancy announcements, a tiny baby growing into a bright-eyed little girl. There was love in every frame, the kind of deep, genuine affection that couldn't be manufactured or bought. "How long?" she asked when he returned with 2 steaming mugs. 2 years, Will said, settling into his usual chair. "Cancer." It was quick, which was both a blessing and a curse. Tori curled up on the couch, tucking the wedding dress around her legs. "What was her name?" "Sarah. She was a nurse at the children's hospital. She used to say that healing people was just another form of love." "She sounds wonderful." She was. Will took a sip of his coffee, studying Tori's face. "What about you? What's your story?" For a moment, he thought she might deflect or refuse to answer, but something in the warm atmosphere of the house, the gentle acceptance in his voice, seemed to break through her defenses. "I was supposed to marry a man named Theodore Blackstone tonight," she said quietly. "Theo. He's brilliant, successful, incredibly wealthy. My parents were thrilled. I was supposed to be thrilled. But you weren't. I was supposed to be a lot of things." She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, seeking warmth. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. But standing there in that church surrounded by 500 people I barely knew, I realized I was about to disappear completely. Will nodded slowly. "So you ran." "I ran right out of the church, through the reception hall, past the photographers and the wedding planner, and my mother's horrified expression. I just ran until I couldn't run anymore. And now I'm sitting in a stranger's living room in a ruined wedding dress, drinking coffee, and wondering what the hell I'm going to do with my life." "That's not the worst place to start over," Will said gently. They talked until nearly 300 in the morning, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. Will found himself opening up about things he'd never discussed with anyone. His fears about raising Charlie alone, his guilt about moving on from Sarah's memory, his worry that he was failing as a father. Tori spoke about the suffocating expectations of her upbringing, the way she'd lost herself in trying to be what everyone else wanted her to be. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Will showed her to the guest room, providing her with some of Sarah's old clothes and toiletries. As he turned to leave, Tori spoke softly. "Thank you, Will, for stopping, for not asking too many questions, for just being kind." "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's a new day." The next morning, Will woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. For a moment, he was disoriented. He'd grown accustomed to the silence of the house. Then he remembered Tori and felt a flutter of something he couldn't quite name. He found her at the stove, wearing one of Sarah's old sweaters and a pair of jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger this way, more approachable. Charlie was sitting at the kitchen table studying their unexpected guest with the unblinking intensity that only 8-year-olds could manage. "Dad," Charlie exclaimed when she saw him. "Emma's mom brought me home early because she felt sick, and there's a lady making pancakes." Will caught Tori's amused smile. "This is Tori," he said. "She's staying with us for a little while." "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Charlie asked with the brutal directness of childhood. Charlie Will warned gently. "It's okay," Tori said, crouching down to Charlie's eye level. "I'm just a friend who needed help. Your dad was very kind to me." "He's good at helping people," Charlie said matter-of-factly. "He helped me when Mom died." Will felt his throat tighten. It was the first time Charlie had mentioned Sarah spontaneously in months. Your mom must have been very special, Tori said softly. She was the best mom in the world, Charlie replied. She used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings just like these, but Dad can't make them right. His are always too thick. Maybe we can teach him the secret, Tori suggested with a wink. Over breakfast, Will watched something shift in the dynamic of his small family. Charlie, who had been withdrawn and quiet since Sarah's death, seemed to come alive in Tori's presence. She asked questions about school, admired Charlie's latest drawings, and listened with genuine interest to 8-year-old concerns about friendship and homework. I have to go to work, Will said reluctantly. He'd taken a leave of absence from his finance job after Sarah's death and had been doing freelance consulting from home, but he had a client meeting that couldn't be postponed. I'll be fine, Tori assured him. I should probably start figuring out my next steps anyway. Can Tori stay until you get back? Charlie asked. She promised to help me with my art project. Will looked at Tori, who nodded. If that's okay with you, of course. Make yourself at home. The dashboard display flashed a notification as Will pulled out of the driveway. His AI financial assistant had flagged a troubling pattern in his latest client's portfolio. Will sighed, tapping the screen to expand the analysis. The algorithm was suggesting a complete restructuring of the investment strategy, but something about it felt wrong to Will. The AI was technically correct, but it missed the emotional component. The client was a recent widower with 3 children, and his priorities weren't just about maximizing returns. Will pulled over and began recalibrating the AI's recommendations, adding human context that the algorithm couldn't understand. This was the challenge of his new consulting business, bridging the gap between cold data and human realities. More and more, his clients were being offered cookie-cutter solutions by AI advisors at a fraction of his fee. His unique selling point was the human touch, understanding the stories behind the numbers. But was that enough to sustain a business in 2025? His phone rang through the car's system. It was Adam, his former boss. Will, we need to talk. Henderson and Associates just bought our firm. They're cleaning house, but I convinced them to consider bringing you back. Full benefits education fund for Charlie's stability. The market's shifting, buddy. These independent AI hybrid advisors are taking over. You're too good to be fighting for scraps. Will gripped the steering wheel tighter. I appreciate it, Adam, but I'm making it work. My clients value the personalized approach. For now, Adam's voice was sympathetic but firm. Look, I know why you left. After Sarah, you needed flexibility for Charlie. But it's been 2 years and this market is brutal. The big firms are buying up all the high net worth clients and the middle market is going to the AI platforms. Think about it. The offer's good for a week. The call ended, leaving Will in silence. He glanced at the financial projections on his dashboard. His client base was stable but not growing. The college fund for Charlie wasn't growing as fast as it should, and the house, Sarah's dream house, carried a mortgage that sometimes kept him up at night. He pulled back onto the road, mind racing. The freedom of his current arrangement allowed him to be there for Charlie, to pick her up from school, to attend every parent-teacher conference. But at what cost? And now there was Tori, a complete stranger, who somehow already felt important to both him and Charlie. What was he doing? When Will returned that afternoon, he found Tori and Charlie in the backyard, bundled up in winter coats and working on something near the old garden shed. They were laughing about something, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. It was a sound he hadn't heard in his house for too long. What are you two up to? He asked, approaching them. We're planting a garden, Charlie announced excitedly. Tori knows all about flowers and stuff. She says we can plant roses where Mom's old garden used to be. Will felt a pang of something complex. Gratitude mixed with grief. Sarah's garden had been her pride and joy, but it had gone to seed after her death. He'd been unable to maintain it, and eventually he'd let it grow wild rather than face the painful memories. That's a big project, he said carefully. All the best things are, Tori replied, meeting his eyes. But we don't have to decide anything today. We're just dreaming right now. That evening, after Charlie had gone to bed, Will and Tori sat on the back porch despite the cold, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the snow fall. The backyard looked peaceful under its white blanket, the overgrown garden now just gentle mounds beneath the snow. Thank you, Will said, for today. Charlie hasn't been this animated in months. She's a wonderful kid. She misses her mom terribly, but she's resilient. I worry I'm not enough for her. Sarah was the one who knew how to handle everything. The emotional stuff, the girl stuff. I'm just winging it most of the time. You're doing better than you think, Tori said gently. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when you're scared. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of unspoken understanding between them. Will found himself studying Tori's profile, wondering about the woman beneath the polished exterior. She'd shed the brittle perfection of the night before revealing someone more complex and real. What will you do now, he asked eventually. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long being what other people wanted me to be that I'm not sure who I actually am. I have a marketing background, but I've been out of the workforce for the past year playing the role of the perfect fiancé. You could stay, Will said quietly, surprising himself. For a while, I mean until you figure things out. Tori turned to look at him, searching his face. That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. If anything, you're helping. Charlie's been different today, more like herself, and he paused, struggling with the words. I haven't felt this much like myself in a long time either. Will I? I'm not asking for anything complicated, he said quickly. I'm just saying you're welcome here for as long as you need. Back in her room that night, Tori sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 15 voicemails. The digital aftermath of a runaway bride. She scrolled through the texts from her mother. Where are you? Your father is beside himself. Theodore is devastated. You've humiliated us all. This isn't like you, Victoria. We've invested everything in this wedding. Call me immediately. With trembling fingers, she opened a news alert that had just come in. Breaking Blackstone bride bolts. Heiress Victoria Ashford leaves tech billionaire Theodore Blackstone at the altar. The article included a photo of her airbrushed to perfection beside Theodore at their engagement party. They looked like the perfect couple, her in a designer gown, him in his custom suit, both smiling with practiced precision. Nothing in the image hinted at the emptiness she felt inside the slow suffocation of being molded into Theodore's ideal partner. Her finger hovered over her mother's number. What could she possibly say? Sorry, I ruined the merger disguised as a marriage. Because that's what it had been. A business arrangement masquerading as love. Theodore needed her family's connections and social standing, and her parents needed his money and influence. She set the phone down and walked to the window. The snowfall had stopped and moonlight illuminated Will's backyard. She could make out the raised beds of what must have been Sarah's garden, now dormant under winter's blanket. There was something poetic about it. Life paused, but not ended, waiting for the right moment to begin again. A sharp knock on the front door downstairs made her jump. She heard Will's footsteps, the door opening, and then men's voices, one of them familiar. Theodore. Tori's heart pounded as she crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. She could see Will standing in the doorway, blocking Theodore's entrance. Behind Theodore were two men in dark suits, his security team. Mr. Harrison Theodore's voice was cold and controlled. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't think people belong to other people, Will replied evenly. Victoria is having some kind of breakdown. Theodore continued as if Will hadn't spoken. She's not thinking clearly. Her parents are worried sick. Maybe they should have thought about that before they pressured her into a marriage she didn't want. Theodore's smile was sharp. You don't understand the situation. Victoria has responsibilities, obligations. She can't just run away from her life because she's having cold feet. It's not cold feet when someone realizes they're about to make the biggest mistake of their life. And you're qualified to make that assessment. Theodore's voice carried the edge of someone used to getting his way. You're a nobody, a widower with a kid living in a house that's probably mortgaged to the hilt. What could you possibly offer someone like Victoria? Will felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not offering her anything except the right to make her own choices. Victoria Theodore called past Will into the house. Victoria, come out here. We need to talk. Tori appeared at the top of the stairs, then slowly descended. Charlie appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Hello, Theo, she said calmly. Victoria, thank God. You've had everyone worried sick. What's this nonsense about running away? We can fix this. Whatever's wrong, nothing's wrong, Tori said, stepping forward. That's the problem. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be, and it was suffocating me. You're being dramatic. You're 32 years old, not some teenager having a rebellion. We have a life together. Plans. You have plans. You've always had plans. I was just expected to go along with them. Theodore's expression hardened. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, financial security, a place in society. What more could you want? I want to matter, Tori said quietly. I want to be more than just an accessory to your success. This is ridiculous, Theodore snapped. You're coming home with me right now and we're going to sort this out like adults. No, Tori said firmly. I'm not. Victoria. No, Will interrupted, moving to stand beside Tori. I think you should leave. Theodore's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. I see what's happening here. You think you can play house with my fiancée and her money? But Victoria doesn't have any money of her own. Her trust fund is contingent on marriage and her parents' approval. Without me, she's nothing. Then it's a good thing I'm not with you for your money. Tori said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You'll be back, Theodore said coldly. When reality sets in, when you realize what you've given up, you'll come crawling back. And I might not be so forgiving next time. After Theodore left, the house felt strangely quiet. Charlie had retreated to her room, unsettled by the confrontation. Tori stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, looking fragile and lost. Are you okay? Will asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. Everything he said about the money is true. I don't have anything of my own. I've been living off my parents' goodwill and Theodore's generosity for so long. I don't even know if I'm capable of supporting myself. You're stronger than you think, Will said. And you're not alone in this. Why, she asked, turning to face him. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Will considered the question, searching for words that would capture the complexity of his feelings. Because when Sarah was dying, she made me promise something. She said that if I ever got the chance to help someone find their way back to themselves, I should take it. She said, that's what love really is, helping people become who they're meant to be. Tears slipped down Tori's cheeks. She sounds like she was incredible. She was, and she would have liked you. That night, Will found Tori in the kitchen, staring out the window at the snow-covered backyard. She'd changed into one of Sarah's old sweaters again, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Too much thinking, she replied. I keep wondering what I'm going to do. I have a degree work experience, but it's been over a year since I've used any of it, and starting over at 32 feels terrifying. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, Will said, moving to stand beside her. One day at a time. Is that how you got through losing Sarah? Some days it was 1 hour at a time, sometimes 1 minute. He was quiet for a moment, but it does get easier. Not better exactly, but easier. Do you think you'll ever love someone again? The question hung in the air between them. Will felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he thought about moving on from Sarah. But for the first time, it wasn't accompanied by guilt. I don't know, he said honestly. I never thought I would, but lately I've been thinking that maybe love isn't about replacing what you've lost. Maybe it's about finding a room in your heart for something new. Tori turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Well, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know that you're not alone. Whatever you decide to do, wherever you go, you'll always have a place here. What if I want to stay? She whispered. Then you stay. The next morning brought a new energy to the house. Charlie was excited about the prospect of Tori staying longer, and she immediately began planning ways to make their guests feel more at home. She insisted on showing Tori all her mother's favorite spots in the house, telling stories about Sarah with the unconscious generosity of childhood. Mom used to sit here when she was sad, Charlie said, patting the window seat in the living room. She said watching the birds made her feel better. That's a beautiful way to remember her, Tori said, settling beside Charlie on the cushioned bench. Do you think she would mind if you stayed? Charlie asked, with the directness that sometimes took adults by surprise. I don't know, sweetheart. What do you think? Charlie considered this seriously. I think she'd be happy that Dad smiles more now. He was really sad for a long time. That afternoon, while Charlie was at school, Will and Tori drove to the local garden center. It was early March, still too cold for planting, but Tori wanted to start planning for spring. She moved through the greenhouse with growing excitement, pointing out different varieties of flowers and discussing their care requirements. You really do know about gardening, Will observed, watching her examine a display of seed packets. My grandmother taught me, Tori said, her voice soft with memory. She had the most beautiful garden you have ever seen. I spent summers with her when I was little, learning about soil and seasons and the patience it takes to grow something beautiful. What happened to her? She died when I was in college. My parents sold her house immediately, said it was too much trouble to maintain. The new owners tore up the garden and put in a tennis court. Will heard the pain in her voice and understood another piece of her story. We'll plant a new garden, whatever you want. Really, really. Sarah would have loved that. She always said gardens were about hope. Planting something today for beauty you'll see tomorrow. They spent the rest of the afternoon choosing seeds and planning the layout. Tori sketched designs on napkins, her excitement infectious. Will found himself caught up in her vision, imagining the backyard transformed into something alive and growing. At home, Tori's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert from the financial section. Blackstone Technologies announces major acquisition of Ashford Family Holdings. Tori stared at the screen in disbelief. Theodore was buying out her family's company. The article explained that the deal had been in the works for months but was finalized today. Her father was quoted as saying it was a strategic partnership that ensures the Ashford legacy continues. She knew what this meant. Theodore was consolidating power, ensuring that her family would pressure her to return. Her father had built that company from nothing. He wouldn't stand by while Theodore dismantled it, unless, of course, this had been the plan all along. A business merger sealed with a marriage. The final paragraph made her blood run cold. Sources close to the Blackstone family suggest that the acquisition might be reconsidered if the recently canceled wedding between Theodore Blackstone and Victoria Ashford were to proceed as originally planned. Tori's phone rang. Her mother. With trembling fingers, she answered. Victoria, thank God. You need to come home right now. Your father is devastated. Do you have any idea what you've done, Mom? Theodore is buying everything, Victoria. Everything your father built. He says he'll stop if you come back. You need to fix this. Fix this. Tori felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. You want me to sell myself to save Dad's company? Don't be so dramatic. This is what families do. We make sacrifices for each other. Your father sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay him. By refusing to be a business transaction. By being selfish. Her mother's voice cracked. Victoria, please. We're talking about our entire legacy. Just come home. Talk to Theodore. He still wants to marry you. Tori ended the call and sank down onto the couch, her mind racing. All her life, she'd been the perfect daughter and doing what was expected of her. Going to the right schools, making the right friends, dating the right men. And when Theodore Blackstone, brilliant, wealthy, powerful Theodore, had shown interest in her, her parents had been ecstatic. The perfect match, the perfect merger, but now she understood the true cost. Her freedom, her identity, her soul. Will found her there, staring blankly at the wall. What's wrong, he asked, sitting beside her. Wordlessly, she handed him her phone with the article still displayed. Will read it, his expression darkening. He's using your family to get to you, Will said finally. And it's working, Tori whispered. My father's company is his life's work. If Theodore destroys it because of me, this isn't because of you, Will said firmly. This is Theodore showing his true colors. If he genuinely loved you, he wouldn't be using your family's business as leverage. But my father knew what he was getting into. Will finished gently. Business deals fall apart all the time. If your father agreed to sell to Theodore knowing your relationship was in jeopardy, that's on him, not you. Tori looked at him with wonder. How can you see things so clearly? Will smiled sadly. When you've lost everything that matters, you get pretty good at recognizing what's actually important. She leaned her head on his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. What am I going to do? Whatever you decide, Will said, I'm here. But know this, you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Not even family. In the kitchen, Will's smart home display pinged with an alert. He glanced over to see a message from his bank. Payment overdue, mortgage payment, now 15 days late. Please contact us immediately to avoid penalties. He quickly closed the notification before Tori could see it. The truth was his financial situation was more precarious than he let on. The freelance consulting wasn't bringing in enough to cover the mortgage on Sarah's dream house, Charlie's school expenses, and their day-to-day needs. Adam's offer was looking more necessary by the day, but somehow none of that seemed to matter right now. What mattered was the woman beside him fighting for her freedom. What mattered was Charlie smiling again for the first time in months. What mattered was the garden they would plant when spring finally arrived. One day at a time, he thought. We'll figure it out one day at a time. The news of Victoria Ashford's dramatic exit from her society wedding spread through Greenwich like wildfire. Will scrolled through the headlines on his kitchen's smart display while waiting for his coffee to brew. Runaway bride Blackstone Ashford wedding disaster. Tech billionaire left at the altar. Heiress vanishes after wedding walkout. Each article featured the same professional engagement photo, Theodore looking smug and possessive, Tori appearing polished but somehow diminished beside him. Will swiped the articles away as he heard footsteps on the stairs. Tori appeared in the doorway, her face pale but composed. She wore another of Sarah's old sweaters and a pair of jeans that were slightly too short. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but somehow more real than the woman in those glossy photos. "Morning," she said softly. "I hope I didn't wake you." "Not at all." "Coffee," she nodded gratefully, and he poured her a cup. She took it with both hands as if drawing warmth from the ceramic. "I saw the news," Will said gently. Tori's shoulders tensed. "Is it bad?" Will hesitated. "It's extensive." She sighed and pulled out her phone. Her screen was filled with notifications. Missed calls, texts, emails, social media alerts. "It looks like I've joined the ranks of infamous brides," she said with a weak attempt at humor. "Right up there with Jennifer Wilbanks and Julia Roberts in Runaway Bride. The difference is you had good reason to leave." Her eyes met his, filled with doubt. "Did I? Or am I just being selfish like my mother says?" Before Will could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Harrison." The voice was clipped, professional. "This is Janet Meyer from Greenwich Trust Bank. I'm calling about your mortgage payment. It's now 17 days overdue, and I'll make the payment today." Will interrupted, turning away from Tori. "I've been expecting a client transfer that's been delayed." "You'll have it by end of business. Mr. Harrison, this is the third late payment in 6 months. The bank is considering reviewing your loan terms, I understand. It won't happen again. Thank you for the reminder." He ended the call, his face burning. When he turned back, Tori was studying her coffee, intently pretending she hadn't heard. "Sorry about that," he said, attempting nonchalance. Tori met his eyes. "Sounds like I'm not the only one with financial pressures." Will sighed. "The freelance consulting business isn't as steady as I'd like. After Sarah died, I left my firm to have more flexibility for Charlie, but it's not easy being a single parent and the sole breadwinner." "Something like that." He took a long sip of coffee. "My old firm offered me my job back yesterday. Better salary benefits for Charlie's stability." "You're considering it." "I have to. The house." Will gestured around them. "Sarah loved this place. I can't bear to sell it, but the mortgage is substantial." Tori nodded slowly. "We're quite the pair, aren't we? Both facing life-altering decisions." Will smiled ruefully. "At least we're not facing them alone." Her phone buzzed again, her mother calling for what must have been the 20th time. Tori stared at the screen for a moment, then silenced it. "You can't avoid them forever," Will said gently. "I know, but I need time to figure out what I'm going to say. My father is in the hospital, stress-induced chest pains, according to my mother. She's blaming me, of course." Will winced. "Is he going to be okay?" "Probably. He's had episodes like this before, usually when a big deal is at risk. And this is the biggest deal of all." She set down her coffee. "Speaking of which, I should start looking for bonds. I can't impose on you indefinitely." Will wanted to tell her she could stay as long as she wanted, that her presence had brought life back into his home in a way he hadn't thought possible. But he held back. "You have time. Focus on figuring out what you want first." "What I want," Tori repeated as if testing an unfamiliar concept. "I'm not sure anyone's ever asked me that before." The sound of Charlie's footsteps thundering down the stairs broke the moment. The 8-year-old burst into the kitchen, already dressed for school but with her shirt buttoned incorrectly. "Dad," Tori Jacobs said his mom saw Tori on the news. "Are you famous?" Will shot Tori an apologetic look, but she just smiled and crouched down to Charlie's level. "Not famous, sweetie. Just having a complicated grown-up situation. Here, let me fix your buttons." As Tori rebuttoned Charlie's shirt, Will marveled at how naturally they interacted. There was none of the awkwardness he'd expected between his daughter and this stranger who'd appeared in their lives just days ago. Is that why there was a scary man here last night? Charlie asked. I wasn't really asleep. I heard everything. Will and Tori exchanged looks. Yes, Charlie Will said carefully. That man was Tori's friend, and he wanted her to go with him, but she didn't want to. Charlie's face scrunched up and thought, like when Melissa at school keeps trying to make me play dolls when I want to build with blocks. Will couldn't help but smile at the comparison. Something like that? Yes. People should respect what others want to do. Charlie nodded sagely. That's what Ms. Peterson says too. She says we have to use our words and respect each other's choices. Ms. Peterson is very wise, Tori said, smoothing Charlie's hair. Will glanced at his watch. We need to get going, kiddo. School starts in 20 minutes. Can Tori come with us? Charlie asked, looking up hopefully. Will hesitated, looking at Tori. If Theodore was watching the house and he probably was being seen in public with Will, and Charlie would only fuel the gossip. But Tori surprised him. I'd love to, she said. Let me just grab a jacket. On the drive to Charlie's school, Will kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a black SUV following them. But the streets were quiet, just the usual morning traffic of parents dropping off children and commuters heading to the train station. Charlie chattered the entire way, telling Tori about her science project on plant growth and asking detailed questions about gardens. Tori answered each one patiently, her knowledge impressive. After dropping Charlie off, Will turned to Tori. You didn't have to come, I know, but I can't hide forever, and I enjoyed it, the normalcy of a school run. Will smiled. It's about as normal as it gets. As they pulled away from the school, Tori suddenly tensed. Will, look. Across the street, a man with a telephoto lens was snapping pictures of them from a parked car. Paparazzi, Tori muttered. Theodore must have tipped them off. Will accelerated smoothly away from the school. Don't worry, they'll get bored eventually. But Tori didn't look convinced. This isn't going to be easy for you and Charlie. Having me here is going to put you in the spotlight. We'll manage. Back at the house, Will had to prepare for a video call with a potential client. He set up in his home office, adjusting the professional background he used for meetings. His AI assistant had already analyzed the prospect's portfolio and prepared recommendations, but Will spent time personalizing the approach, adding notes about the client's family situation and risk tolerance factors the AI often overlooked. Just as he was about to connect, a notification appeared on his screen. Client meeting canceled. Message going with Henderson and Associates instead. Their AI platform fees are 40% lower. Sorry. Will sat back, a hollow feeling in his chest. That was the third potential client this month who'd chosen an AI advisor over his services. He pulled up his financial spreadsheet and stared at the projections. Even with careful budgeting, he'd be underwater in 3 months if this trend continued. His phone buzzed with a text from Adam. Think about that offer, Will. Market's only getting tougher for independents. Will closed the spreadsheet and walked to the window. Outside, Tori was in the backyard walking the perimeter of what had once been Sarah's garden. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if mapping the space in her mind. Even from a distance, he could see the focus in her posture, the way she occasionally knelt to examine the soil. There was something mesmerizing about watching her. This woman who'd abandoned a life of luxury and privilege was finding purpose in his overgrown backyard. She seemed more authentic here than in any of those polished photos with Theodore. His phone rang again, Charlie's school. Mr. Harrison, this is Principal Davis. We've had an incident with Charlie. She's fine, but we need you to come in. What happened? There was a slight hesitation. I'd rather discuss it in person. How soon can you get here? 20 minutes. Will found Tori still in the garden when he went to tell her about the call. Charlie's school, is everything okay? Tori asked, concern immediately evident. They said she's fine, but there's been an incident. I need to go in. I'll come with you, Tori said without hesitation. You don't have to. I want to. Unless you'd rather I didn't. Will realized he actually wanted her there. No, please come. I could use the support. When they arrived at the school, they were directed to Principal Davis's office. Charlie sat in a chair outside, her face tear-stained but defiant. Dad, she exclaimed, jumping up to hug him. They're being unfair. Let's hear what happened first, okay? Will said gently, steering her back to her seat. Wait here while we talk to Principal Davis. Inside the office, they found not only the principal, but also Mrs. Peterson and another woman Will didn't recognize. Mr. Harrison, Principal Davis began, "Thank you for coming so quickly. This is Mrs. Blake, Amber's mother." Will nodded politely, trying to recall which of Charlie's classmates was Amber. There was an altercation during recess, Principal Davis continued. Charlie punched Amber. Will blinked in surprise. Charlie, his gentle, introspective daughter, had punched someone. According to several witnesses, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice gentle but firm, Amber was teasing Charlie about certain news stories. Will's heart sank. "The Tory situation, my daughter has a split lip," Mrs. Blake interjected. "Amber was just repeating what she saw on the news, that your house guest abandoned her own wedding and is hiding out at your place. Children repeat what they hear at home." Will felt Tory tense beside him. "She says she's just a friend," Charlie said. "Amber called her a gold digger and said Dad was her boyfriend." "And that's a lie." Will turned to look at his daughter, who had apparently entered the office unnoticed. Charlie, Principal Davis sighed. "Charlie, we asked you to wait outside. It's not fair." Charlie's voice rose. "Amber said mean things about Tori and Dad, and nobody did anything." "That doesn't make it okay to hit people," Will said firmly. "Mrs. Peterson's telling me to use my words, but when I did, Amber just laughed and said Dad was dating a famey run a bird." There was a brief silence as the adults processed the child's mispronunciation of famous runaway bride. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Will had to suppress a smile. "Violence is never the answer," Charlie, Principal Davis said. "We have a zero-tolerance policy." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, resulting in Charlie receiving a one-day suspension, a first for her. As they left the office, Charlie walked ahead, shoulders slumped. "I'm so sorry," Tori said quietly to Will. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. My drama is affecting your family." Will shook his head. "This isn't your fault. Kids can be cruel, and Charlie's been dealing with a lot since losing Sarah. This was probably in building for a while. Still, maybe it would be better if I found somewhere else to stay." Will stopped walking and turned to face her. "Where would you go?" Tori looked away. "I don't know. A hotel, maybe? Until I figure things out. And how would you pay for it? Theodore froze your accounts, remember?" Tori had no answer for that. "Look," Will continued softer now, "Charlie didn't hit that girl because of you. She did it because she's hurting and confused and trying to protect our family. And whether you meant to or not, Tori, you've become part of that family in her eyes." Tori's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything. Just stay. Help me figure out how to talk to Charlie about this. We'll face the rest as it comes." In the car, Charlie sat silently in the back seat, staring out the window. After a few minutes, Tori turned around. "Thank you for standing up for me, Charlie. That was brave, even if hitting isn't the right way to handle it." Charlie shrugged, still looking out the window. "Amber's been mean since my mom died. She says I'm weird because I don't talk as much anymore." Will's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You never told me that. You're always worried about work and money," Charlie said matter-of-factly. "I didn't want to add more problems." Will felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The idea that his 8-year-old daughter was shouldering her pain alone to protect him was almost unbearable. Charlie, Tori said gently, "It's not your job to protect your dad from problems. That's what adults are for. We handle the hard stuff so kids can just be kids." "Mom used to say that," Charlie said quietly. "That's why she didn't tell me she was really sick until the end. She said it wasn't my job to worry." Will had to pull over, his vision blurring with tears. He parked on a side street and turned to face his daughter. "Charlie, look at me. You are the most important thing in my life. Nothing, not work, not money, not anything matters more than you. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you couldn't tell me things." Charlie unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed into the front, wrapping her arms around Will's neck. "I miss Mom," she whispered. "I know, kiddo. I miss her too." Tori sat quietly, feeling like an intruder on their grief. But then Charlie reached out one arm, inviting her into the embrace. Tori hesitated, then leaned in, completing their circle. They stayed that way for a long moment, three broken people finding comfort in each other's presence. Finally, Charlie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "Mom always said ice cream helps with sad days." Will laughed through his tears. "Ice cream it is." That night, after Charlie had gone to bed, Will found Tori on the back porch again, wrapped in a blanket against the early March chill. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the yard. In the distance, the first few spring peepers had begun their tentative chorus. "How is she?" Tori asked as Will sat beside her, asleep. "I think today took a lot out of her." He sighed. "I had no idea she was being bullied." "Children can be extraordinarily good at hiding their pain," Tori said, "especially when they're trying to protect someone they love." Will rubbed his face. "I thought I was doing okay, keeping it together for her. But maybe I've been so focused on the practical stuff, making enough money, keeping the house, that I missed what was really going on. You're being too hard on yourself. You're doing the best you can in an impossible situation." "Is it enough, though?" Tori considered this. "My grandmother used to say that there's no such thing as perfect parenting, only present parenting. Being there, really there, is what matters most." Will smiled faintly. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was." Tori pulled the blanket tighter. "I wish I'd listened to her more. She tried to warn me about losing myself in other people's expectations." "What do you mean?" Tori was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I was 16, my parents started pushing me towards certain colleges, certain career paths, all designed to position me for the right marriage. My grandmother saw what was happening. She told me, 'Tori, a garden planted in the wrong soil will never thrive, no matter how much you water it.' I didn't understand then. I thought she was just being cryptic as usual. And now I see that I've been planted in Theodore's soil for so long that I forgot how to grow on my own. I became what everyone else wanted, the perfect socialite, the perfect corporate wife-to-be. I lost track of the real Victoria somewhere along the way." Will studied her profile in the moonlight. "Who is the real Victoria?" Tori laughed softly. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I'm not entirely sure anymore. But I think she's someone who cares about more than designer labels and charity galas. Someone who remembers the joy of digging in the dirt and watching things grow. Someone who wants her life to mean something beyond being an accessory to a powerful man." "Sounds like someone worth getting to know," Will said. Their eyes met, and for a moment something electric passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. Then Tori looked away, breaking the spell. "It's getting late," she said, standing. "Thank you for today, Will. For everything." As she walked past him toward the door, Will caught her hand. "Tori." She turned, her expression questioning. "You don't have to keep thanking me. Having you here, it's good. For Charlie, yes, but for me too." Tori squeezed his hand once, then gently pulled away. "Good night, Will." "Good night, Tori." He remained on the porch long after she'd gone inside, listening to the spring peepers and trying to make sense of the feelings stirring within him. Guilt, hope, fear, and something else he wasn't ready to name. The next morning, Will received an email that made his blood run cold. It was from his bank informing him that his mortgage payment had been returned due to insufficient funds. That was impossible. He'd transferred money from his business account specifically to cover it. He logged into his business account and found it nearly empty. A large client payment had been reversed with a note citing dissatisfaction with services. The client was Henderson Global, Adam's new firm. Will called Adam immediately. "What the hell is going on?" "The Peterson payment was reversed. That invoice was approved weeks ago." There was a pause on the line. "Yeah, about that. Theodore Blackstone called our managing partner yesterday. Seems he's considering moving some significant business our way, but he had concerns about you." "Concerns? What are you talking about?" "Blackstone mentioned you're harboring his fiancée after she had some kind of breakdown. Said there might be legal issues. The partners got nervous about the association." Will felt a cold fury building. "So you pulled a legitimate payment for work I've already completed because Theodore Blackstone snapped his fingers." "Look." Will Adams' voice turned placating. "It's nothing personal. It's just business. Blackstone's potential accountant is worth millions. Your invoice is for what, 20,000? The math is simple. In our friendship. What's that worth in your calculation?" Another pause. "I'm sorry, Will. If you reconsider the job offer, this all goes away. You come back to the firm, Blackstone gets what he wants, everybody wins. Except Tori," Will said coldly. "She becomes property again. That's between them. It's not our business." Will ended the call without another word. He sat at his desk, mind racing. Theodore was systematically cutting off his options. Without that payment, he couldn't cover the mortgage. Without the mortgage payment, the bank might begin foreclosure proceedings, especially given his recent payment history. And it wasn't just about the house. Charlie's private school tuition was due next month. The property taxes were coming up. His health insurance premium had just increased. The financial walls were closing in, and Theodore knew it. He was still sitting there when Tori knocked gently on the office door. Will Charlie's school just called. They want to know if she'll be back tomorrow or if she's serving her full suspension. Will looked up, trying to mask his distress. I think we'll keep her home tomorrow. I could use a family day. Tori's expression softened. Is everything okay? You look fine, Will said more sharply than he intended. Just work stress. Tori didn't look convinced, but she nodded. I was thinking of making soup for lunch. That okay? Sounds perfect. I'll be out in a bit. After she left, Will pulled up his resume and began updating it. He hated the idea of crawling back to his old firm, of surrendering to Theodore's manipulation. But what choice did he have? Charlie needed stability. The house, Sarah's house, needed to be protected. By lunchtime, Will had composed an email to Adam, essentially accepting the job offer but negotiating for better terms. He hadn't sent it yet, still wrestling with what felt like a betrayal of both Sarah's memory and Tori's freedom. The smell of homemade soup drew him to the kitchen, where he found Charlie and Tori working side by side at the counter chopping vegetables. Charlie was standing on a step stool, her tongue between her teeth in concentration, as she carefully cut carrots into uneven chunks. Look, Dad, I'm helping. Tori says I'm a natural chef. Will smiled, his troubles momentarily forgotten. Those are some impressive carrot-cutting skills, kiddo. Tori shot him a warm look over Charlie's head. She's mastering the art of the rustic cut. Very gourmet. Will leaned against the door frame, watching them work together. There was an easy rhythm to their interaction, as if Tori had always been part of their lives. Charlie was animated, chattering about cooking shows she'd watched with Sarah, and Tori listened attentively, asking questions and offering encouragement. It struck Will that this was what he'd been missing, not just since Sarah died, but perhaps even before her illness. This sense of wholeness of a family working in harmony. Sarah's cancer had cast a long shadow even before her death. There had been hospital visits, treatments, hushed conversations about prognoses. Charlie had lost pieces of her childhood to her mother's illness, and Will had lost pieces of himself to caregiving and grief. But watching Charlie and Tori now, Will felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just the day-to-day hope of getting through another week, but a deeper hope that life could still hold on and connection and new beginnings. The soup was delicious, a hearty vegetable concoction that Charlie proudly announced she had named Garden Treasure Soup, because, as she explained, all the vegetables were like treasures from the garden. After lunch, Will's phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Peterson, Charlie's teacher. Mr. Harrison, I wanted to check on Charlie. How is she doing? She's okay, I think. Today has been good for her. I'm glad to hear it. Mrs. Peterson paused. I also wanted to tell you that Amber's mother came to me after you left. Apparently, Amber admitted that she's been saying unkind things to Charlie for some time now. She's been moved to a different table group for the rest of the year. Will felt a rush of relief. Thank you for telling me. Charlie will be back the day after tomorrow. There's one more thing, Mr. Harrison. Mrs. Peterson sounded hesitant. The school counselor and I have noticed that Charlie spends most of her free time on her tablet rather than interacting with other children. We're concerned about her social development. Have you noticed similar patterns at home? Will thought about it. Yes, actually. She's always been a bit introverted, but it's gotten more pronounced since Sarah died. She retreats into games and videos a lot. That's understandable given what she's been through. But children need real connections, especially after a loss, Mrs. Peterson suggested gently. Perhaps finding activities that engage her with others would help, something that combines her interests with social interaction. After ending the call, Will found Tori and Charlie in the living room, Charlie showing Tori how to play her favorite tablet game. The irony wasn't lost on him. Hey, you two. What do you think about getting outside for a while? Maybe we could start clearing that garden space? Charlie looked up from her tablet. But it's still too cold to plant anything. True, Will said, but we could start preparing the soil. Tori says that's an important first step, right? Tori nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Good soil is the foundation of any garden. We could check what we're working with, maybe even start a compost pile. Charlie considered this. Can I wear my pink gardening gloves, the ones Mom got me? Of course. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, Tori directing their efforts to clear away the overgrowth from Sarah's old garden beds. The work was physical and satisfying. Will found himself relaxing for the first time in days as he pulled weeds and turned soil. Charlie darted around in her oversized gardening gloves, collecting interesting rocks and the occasional earthworm, which she insisted on naming. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Will stood back to survey their progress. They'd cleared about half of the original garden space. The rectangular plot now looked like a blank canvas, ready for new life. "What do you think?" Tori asked, coming to stand beside him. She had a smudge of dirt on her cheek and her hair was falling out of its ponytail, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Can you see it?" Will looked at the freshly turned earth, trying to envision what Tori saw. "What am I looking for?" Tori gestured animatedly. "Here near the fence, we'll plant tall sunflowers to attract pollinators. Then a row of tomatoes. They need the support of the fence anyway. On this side, herbs and lettuces for easy harvesting. And in the center, a mix of flowers and vegetables, zinnias, cosmos, peppers, eggplants. A cottage garden, style beautiful and productive." As she spoke, the bare plot transformed in Will's mind. He could almost see the garden she described bursting with color and life. "It sounds perfect," he said softly. Tori turned to him, her expression suddenly uncertain. "Is it too much? I don't want to overstep." This was Sarah's garden. Will shook his head. "Sarah would love your vision. She always said gardens should be both beautiful and useful. Her specialty was vegetables, but she planted flowers among them to attract beneficial insects. Like you," Charlie piped up, coming to join them. "Mom said you were her beneficial insect because you helped her garden grow better." Will laughed, surprised. "I don't remember her saying that." "She told me when you were at work," Charlie said matter-of-factly. "She said everybody needs someone who helps them grow better, and you were hers." An unexpected lump formed in Will's throat. He hadn't known Sarah had said that to Charlie. It was like receiving a message from his late wife, a reminder of what they'd had and perhaps permission to find it again. Dad, Charlie tugged at his sleeve. "Can we have hot chocolate? I'm cold." The spell broken. Will nodded. "Hot chocolate it is." "Race you to the house." Charlie took off, running, her pink gloves flapping. Will and Tori followed more slowly. "She's going to sleep well tonight," Tori observed. "Nothing like physical work to tire out a child." And an adult, Will admitted, rolling his shoulders. "I haven't done that much digging in years." "You'll feel it tomorrow," Tori warned with a smile. "But it's a good kind of sore. Reminds you that you're alive." Will glanced at her. "You seem different today. More, I don't know, settled." Tori considered this. "I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm doing something real. Something that matters, even if it's just clearing an old garden." She paused. "Also, I applied for a job this morning." "You did?" "That's great. We're the Greenfield Foundation. It's a small environmental nonprofit here in town. They need a marketing coordinator. The pay isn't much, but it's a start," Will finished for her. "That's fantastic, Tori. I might not get it," she cautioned. "I've been out of the workforce for over a year, and then there's the whole runaway bride situation. Not exactly a sterling professional image. You never know. Some employers might appreciate someone with the courage to make difficult choices." Inside, they found Charlie already at the kitchen counter arranging mugs for hot chocolate. Will started heating milk while Tori located the cocoa powder. They moved around each other with the ease of a family who'd been sharing a kitchen for years, not days. After Charlie went to bed exhausted from the day's activities, Will found Tori in the living room, laptop open on her knees. She looked up as he entered. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the computer. "I borrowed it to work on my resume. Mine is still on my laptop at Theodore's." "Of course I don't mind." "How's it going?" Tori sighed. "It's strange trying to summarize your professional value after being told your only value was as someone's wife. I keep second-guessing everything I write." Will sat beside her on the couch. "Maybe I can help. I've reviewed plenty of resumes." For the next hour, they worked together on Tori's resume, Will offering suggestions on how to frame her experience and skills. It was comfortable, collaborative work, and Will found himself impressed by Tori's professional background. Before meeting Theodore, she'd been a rising star in cause marketing, helping nonprofits develop compelling campaigns. "You're really good at this," he said, reading over her descriptions of past projects. "Why did you give it up?" Tori's expression clouded. Theodore didn't think it was substantial enough. "He wanted me focused on supporting his career, attending the right events, making the right connections." She shrugged. "At first I thought he was right. His work seemed more important than mine. Gradually I just stopped." And your parents, they agreed with him. My father called my nonprofit work playing at having a career. She mimicked her father's gruff voice, then sighed. The sad thing is I believed them. I let them convince me that what I cared about didn't matter. Will studied her profile as she stared at the screen. I think that's changing now. I can see it in the way you talk about your work, the way you interact with Charlie. You're remembering who you are. Tori met his gaze, her eyes vulnerable. I hope so, because I can't go back to being that other person. I just can't. The intensity of her words hung in the air between them. Will felt an overwhelming urge to reach for her, to promise her that she would never have to go back. Instead, he gently closed the laptop. I think that's enough resume work for tonight. You've made great progress. Tori nodded, breaking the moment. You're right. Thanks for your help. As she stood to go, Will remembered the email to Adam still unsent in his drafts folder. If he took the job back at the firm, it would solve his financial problems. But at what cost? Could he really capitulate to Theodore's manipulation? And what would it mean for Tori if he did? Hey, Tori, he called as she reached the stairs. She turned, eyebrows raised in question. The job at Greenfield Foundation. When do you interview? Tomorrow afternoon, actually. They called while we were in the garden. Why Will made a quick decision. I was thinking maybe we could look at some interview outfits for you tomorrow morning. I have some time before my client call. Tori smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile that Will was coming to treasure. That would be great. Thank you. After she went upstairs, Will returned to his office and stared at the draft email to Adam. After a long moment, he deleted it. There had to be another way, one that didn't involve surrendering to Theodore's tactics. He was about to shut down his computer when a new email appeared in his inbox. The subject line made his heart skip. Urgent trust documentation review. Sarah Harrison Estate. Will opened it with trepidation. The email was from Jameson and Burke, the law firm that had handled Sarah's will and the small trust she'd established for Charlie's education. Dear Mr. Harrison, our firm has been conducting a routine review of trust assets and has identified a discrepancy in the Sarah Harrison Trust that requires your immediate attention. According to our records, Mrs. Harrison made an investment in Green Tech Innovations, LLC prior to her passing that was not properly documented in the trust assets. Green Tech Innovations has recently been acquired by Nexus Sustainable Solutions, resulting in a significant value increase for early investors. Our preliminary assessment indicates that your share of this investment may be substantial. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to review this matter and ensure proper distribution of these assets. Will read the email 3 times trying to make sense of it. Sarah had invested in a tech startup. He had no knowledge of this. They had always made financial decisions together. Why would she have done this without telling him? He checked the law firm's website to confirm the email was legitimate. It was. With shaking hands, he dialed the after-hours number provided in the email. A pleasant-voiced receptionist answered. Jameson and Burke, how may I direct your call? This is William Harrison. I received an email about my late wife's trust. Is anyone still available to discuss this? Yes, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Burke asked to be notified if you called. Please hold. A moment later, a familiar voice came on the line. Will Thomas Burke here? Thank you for calling so promptly. Thomas, what's this about? I had no idea Sarah invested in a startup. There was a pause. She didn't tell you no. We always made financial decisions together. At least I thought we did. Thomas sighed. I should have realized. Sarah swore me to secrecy at the time. She wanted it to be a surprise. A surprise, yes. She made the investment about 3 months before her diagnosis. She called it her Hope Fund, a long-shot investment that might someday give you and Charlie something unexpected. She planned to tell you on your 10th anniversary, but then she got sick. Will finished, his voice thick with emotion. Exactly. After the diagnosis, she asked me not to mention it unless it paid off. She didn't want to raise false hopes during such a difficult time. And frankly, the company was struggling then. None of us expected this outcome. Will took a deep breath. How much are we talking about, Thomas? The lawyer named a figure that made Will's ears ring. That's impossible. I assure you it's quite real, Thomas said. Green Tech's sustainable battery technology turned out to be revolutionary. Nexus acquired them for a premium, and early investors like Sarah are reaping the benefits. The funds are available to you as trustee with a portion reserved for Charlie's education as stipulated in Sarah's trust documents. Will sat in stunned silence. The amount Thomas had mentioned would pay off the mortgage entirely with enough left over to secure Charlie's future and give Will the freedom to rebuild his consulting practice on his own terms. It was as if Sarah had reached across time to save them one final act of love and protection. "I'll need you to come to the office to sign some papers," Thomas continued. "How's tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow morning is perfect," Will managed. "Thank you, Thomas." After ending the call, Will sat motionless, overwhelmed by emotions too complex to name. Gratitude, grief, amazement, and beneath it all, a profound sense that Sarah was still taking care of them somehow. He thought about Tori upstairs working so hard to rebuild her life from scratch, about Charlie processing her grief through gardening and art, about himself struggling to keep their little family afloat. Sarah's gift changed everything. They were no longer financially vulnerable to Theodore's manipulation. Will could support Tori's journey to independence without fear of losing his home. Charlie's education was secure. It was a miracle, a Sarah miracle. Will was still sitting at his desk when his phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender clear. "I warned you what would happen if you interfered, Harrison. This is just the beginning. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has weaknesses. I'll find yours. Tell Victoria to come home where she belongs, or you'll regret the day you picked her up on that road." TB, Will stared at the message, a chill running through him despite the newfound security of Sarah's gift. Theodore Blackstone wasn't just wealthy and powerful, he was ruthless. And he wasn't going to give up easily, but neither was Will. Not anymore. The next morning, Will woke early, his mind still processing the dual revelations of the previous night, Sarah's unexpected financial gift, and Theodore's explicit threat. He slipped quietly downstairs, careful not to wake Charlie or Tori, and made coffee. The house was peaceful in the pre-dawn light, the kitchen windows reflecting his image against the darkness outside. He looked tired, he realized. The past week had been an emotional roller coaster. But beneath the fatigue, there was something else in his reflection, a determination he hadn't felt in years. Sarah's final gift had done more than solve their financial problems. It had reminded Will of the person he used to be before grief and survival mode had consumed him. Someone who took risks. Someone who fought for what mattered. Theodore's threat no longer frightened him. If anything, it clarified things. This wasn't just about giving Tori temporary shelter anymore. This was about standing up to a bully who thought his money gave him the right to control others. Will was still contemplating this when Tori appeared in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and one of Sarah's sweaters, her hair damp from the shower. "You're up early," she said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." Tori studied his face. "Good things or bad things?" Will smiled faintly. "Both, actually. We need to talk." They sat at the kitchen table and Will told her about Sarah's investment and the unexpected windfall. Tori listened with wide eyes, occasionally shaking her head in amazement. "That's incredible," she said when he finished. "Like she's still watching over you both." "It feels that way," Will admitted. "But there's something else." He showed her Theodore's text. Tori's face paled as she read it. "I'm so sorry, Will. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Theodore doesn't give up when he wants something, and right now that something is me, or rather controlling me." "Why?" Will asked. "What's so important about keeping you under his thumb?" Tori sighed. "It's complicated. Partly it's his ego, he can't stand losing, especially publicly, but it's also about the merger with my family's company. The deal was structured around our marriage. Some of the terms are contingent on the wedding actually happening, so this is still about business for him." "It always was," Tori said bitterly. "Our entire relationship was a business transaction disguised as a love story. I just didn't see it until I was standing in that church about to sign away my life." Will reached across the table and took her hand. "Well, you don't have to go back. Not now, not ever. Sarah's gift means we're financially secure. Theodore can't pressure us through money anymore." Tori squeezed his hand gratefully. "Thank you. But he'll find other ways. He always does." "Let him try," Will said with newfound confidence. "We'll face it together." They were interrupted by Charlie bounding into the kitchen, already fully dressed despite the early hour. "Dad, Tori, can we work in the garden again today?" "I dreamed about sunflowers," Will laughed. "Good morning to you too, kiddo. And yes, we can garden later, but I have a meeting this morning and Tori has a job interview this afternoon. Charlie's face fell momentarily, then brightened. Can I come with you to your meeting and I'll be super quiet? Not this time, sweetie. It's at a lawyer's office. Pretty boring stuff. What about school, Tori asked. Isn't your suspension over? Charlie shrugged. Ms. Peterson said I could come back tomorrow. Today's optional. Will exchanged a look with Tori. Actually, I think Tori could use your help getting ready for her interview. What do you think, Tori? Could Charlie help you pick out an outfit? Tori caught on immediately. That would be amazing. I'm so nervous about what to wear. I could really use a fashion consultant. Charlie beamed. I'm good at clothes. Mom always let me pick her necklaces for important days. After breakfast, Will left for his meeting with Thomas Burke, leaving Tori and Charlie to plan interview outfits. As he drove, he felt lighter than he had in years. The mortgage that had been hanging over his head would soon be paid off. Charlie's education was secure, and Tori, brilliant, brave Tori, was taking her first steps toward independence. Thomas greeted him warmly at the law office, ushering him into a conference room where stacks of documents awaited. I've prepared everything, Thomas said, taking a seat. We just need your signature in a few places. As Will began signing, Thomas cleared his throat. There's one more thing Sarah asked me to give you if this investment ever paid off. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. She wrote this the day before she died. Asked me to keep it until you receive the funds. Will stared at the envelope, his name written in Sarah's familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, he opened it and began to read. My dearest Will, if you're reading this, two things have happened. I'm gone, and my crazy investment gamble paid off. Always bet on smart women in tech, Will. Remember that for Charlie? I made this investment because I wanted to leave you and Charlie with more than memories. I wanted to leave you with possibilities. The money isn't the gift, Will. The freedom it gives you is the gift. I know you. After I'm gone, you'll hold on to everything that reminds you of me, the house, my garden, maybe even your grief. You'll wear it like armor. But life isn't meant to be preserved. It's meant to be lived. So here's my last request. Use this gift to live, Will. Really live. Take Charlie to the Grand Canyon, restart your photography, fall in love again. Yes, I said it. You're too wonderful to be alone forever. Someone once told me that the measure of a life well lived is how many things you plant that outlive you. This money is my seed for your future. Watch it grow into something beautiful. All my love, always, Sarah. P.S. If you're wondering why I kept this a secret, it's because you would have talked me out of it. You always were the sensible one, but sometimes, Will, the heart knows what the head can't understand. Trust your heart. Will read the letter twice, tears streaming down his face. It was so perfectly Sarah, practical and poetic, loving, and a little bit bossy even from beyond the grave. Thomas quietly passed him a box of tissues. She was an extraordinary woman. Yes, Will agreed, carefully folding the letter. She was. After finishing the paperwork, Will left the law office with a certified check that represented Sarah's final gift and a heart full of conflicting emotions. Grief and gratitude. Loss and possibility. The past, and perhaps for the first time since Sarah's death, the future. He was about to get into his car when his phone buzzed with a text from Charlie. Tori looks amazing for her interview. Come home and see. Will smiled and started the engine. Home. To his daughter and the woman who had unexpectedly changed both their lives. To the garden they were bringing back to life together. To the possibilities Sarah had given them. As he drove, he didn't notice the black sedan that pulled out to follow him, or the man inside taking photos of his every move. Theodore Blackstone's resources were vast, his reach long, and his patience limited. The game was far from over. The day of Tori's job interview dawned bright and clear, a perfect early spring morning. Will stood in the kitchen making pancakes while Charlie set the table with exaggerated precision, folding napkins into triangles just the way Sarah had taught her. Through the window, Will could see the garden they'd begun clearing, patches of fresh earth amid the winter-dead grass full of possibility. Dad, Charlie said, carefully arranging forks, do you think Tori will get the job? I hope so, kiddo. She's smart and talented. They'd be lucky to have her. Then she can stay with us forever. Charlie beamed, placing the last fork with a flourish. Will hesitated. It's not that simple, Charlie. Tori needs to figure out her own path. But she likes us, Charlie insisted. And we like her. And she makes the garden grow. That's what Mom always said was important, finding people who help you grow. Before Will could respond, Tori appeared in the doorway. She wore a simple navy dress that must have been Sarah's, tastefully accessorized with a patterned scarf. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she'd applied light makeup that accentuated her natural beauty. The overall effect was professional and polished, but approachable, perfect for a nonprofit interview. Charlie gasped, "You look so pretty." Will found himself momentarily speechless. The transformation was striking not because Tori looked more beautiful, though she did, but because she seemed to have reclaimed something of herself. This wasn't Theodore's perfectly coiffed socialite fiancée, nor was it the vulnerable woman in borrowed clothes he'd come to know over the past week. This was someone new, or perhaps someone rediscovered. They ate breakfast together, all three slightly giddy with the normalcy of it, a family meal before a workday, an interview, a day of school. After Sarah's death, Will had struggled to maintain even the semblance of routine. Now somehow, they had created a new one together. As Tori prepared to leave, gathering her portfolio and the resume they'd worked on together, Will handed her a set of keys. "What's this?" she asked, looking down at them. "House keys," Will said, "so you can come and go as you need to. And this one is for the car in the garage, Sarah's old Volvo. I've kept it running, but it doesn't get driven much. I thought you might need it for the interview." Tori stared at the keys, then at Will, her eyes suddenly shimmering with tears. "This is... Will, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. We're in this together now, right?" She nodded, composing herself with visible effort. "Right, together." After Tori left and Charlie headed to school with strict instructions not to punch anyone no matter what they said, Will sat at his desk, staring at his financial projections. Sarah's gift had changed everything. The mortgage would be paid off. Charlie's education was secure. He could rebuild his consulting practice at his own pace, focusing on quality over quantity. He was in the middle of drafting an email to a potential client when his phone rang, an unknown number. Probably another reporter looking for dirt on Tori and Theodore, he thought, but answered anyway. William Harrison. The voice was crisp, professional. "Speaking. This is Elaine Moore from the Department of Children and Families. I'm calling to schedule a home visit regarding a complaint we've received about your daughter Charlotte's living situation." Will's blood ran cold. "Excuse me? What complaint?" There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "We received an anonymous report expressing concern about an unstable home environment, possible exposure to inappropriate adult situations, and educational neglect. I understand Charlotte was recently suspended from school for violent behavior." Will gripped the phone tighter. "That was a minor incident. She's 8 years old, for God's sake. There was a bully, Mr. Harrison. I'm not calling to debate the merits of the complaint. I'm simply scheduling the required home visit. How is tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Will's mind raced. This had Theodore written all over it. First financial pressure now. This an attack on his ability to parent Charlie. He'd underestimated how far Theodore would go. "Mr. Harrison. Are you still there?" "Yes, sorry. Tomorrow at 2 is fine. But I want to be clear, there is absolutely nothing inappropriate happening in my home. My daughter is safe, loved, and well cared for. That's what we'll be assessing, Mr. Harrison. Please ensure that Charlotte is present for the visit." After ending the call, Will sat motionless, ice in his veins. A DCF investigation. Even if the complaint was baseless, and it was the process itself, would be invasive, stressful, and potentially damaging. What if they spoke to Charlie's teachers about her withdrawal after Sarah's death? What if they interviewed classmates who had heard about the famous runaway bride staying with them? What if they somehow twisted his relationship with Tori into something inappropriate? He needed help. Professional help. Pulling up his contacts, Will found the number for Rachel Kim, a family attorney he had met through a business networking group. They weren't close friends, but she'd always struck him as sharp and no-nonsense, exactly what he needed now. Her assistant put him through immediately when he mentioned DCF. Will Rachel's voice was warm but focused. "What's going on?" He explained the situation. Tori's arrival, Theodore's threats, and now the DCF complaint. Rachel listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. "First, take a breath," she said when he finished. "This is concerning but not unusual in high-conflict custody situations. But this isn't a custody situation. I have full custody of Charlie. Her mother is deceased. Technically, yes, but the dynamics are similar. Someone is using the system to apply pressure." She paused. Will I need to ask you directly, is there any truth to these allegations? Anything that could be misinterpreted? Absolutely not. Charlie is thriving despite everything she's been through. Yes, she's had some adjustment issues since Sarah died. And yes, there was one incident at school, but what about this woman, Victoria? Is your relationship with her inappropriate in any way? Are you sharing a bedroom and displaying physical affection in front of Charlotte? No. Will felt his face flush. She's staying in our guest room. We're friends, maybe moving towards something more, but we've been extremely careful around Charlie. Good, Rachel's tone was matter of fact. Then here's what we're going to do. I'll come to the home visit tomorrow to represent your interests. Before that, I want you to gather documentation, Charlie's recent medical records showing regular checkups, her school attendance and performance records, photos of her room and play areas showing a nurturing environment. If you have character references from teachers, neighbors, or family friends, those would be helpful too. Will scribbled notes as Rachel spoke, feeling marginally better with a concrete plan. Thank you, Rachel. What do I owe you for this? We'll figure that out later. For now, focus on preparing for the visit. And Will, don't contact Theodore. Don't threaten or accuse him. Document everything but engage with nothing. Understand, understood. When Tori returned from her interview bubbling with excitement about the Greenfield Foundation's projects, Will pushed his worries aside and focused on celebrating her success. He waited until Charlie was in bed before telling her about the DCF investigation. She listened in horror, her face paling as he explained. "This is all my fault," she whispered when he finished. "Theodore is going after you and Charlie because of me." "It's not your fault," Will said firmly. "It's Theodore's. He's the one making these choices. But if you hadn't stayed, you'd be trapped in a loveless marriage to a controlling man who treats people like chess pieces." "Tori, look at me. This was always going to get messy. Theodore isn't the type to lose gracefully. But we'll handle it. Rachel is an excellent attorney and the complaint is baseless. There's nothing for DCF to find here except a loving home." Tori didn't look convinced. "Maybe I should leave just until things calm down. I could stay at a hotel." "With what money?" Will interrupted gently. "Your accounts are still frozen, remember? I could ask my mother for help." She looked ill at the suggestion, but continued. "If I told her I was considering reconciling with Theodore, she might stop." Will said, taking her hands. "Running isn't the answer. Not again. We face this together." The DCF visit the next day went better than expected. Rachel arrived early as promised, reviewing their documentation and coaching them on how to interact with the caseworker. When Elaine Moore arrived, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Rachel managed the introduction with professional cordiality. "Ms. Moore, thank you for coming. I'm Rachel Kim, representing the Harrison family. We understand you're just doing your job and we want to be fully cooperative." The caseworker raised an eyebrow at the attorney's presence but said nothing as she began her inspection. She toured the house, noting Charlie's well-appointed bedroom, the fully stocked kitchen, the family photos throughout the home. She reviewed Charlie's school and medical records, nodding occasionally. She interviewed Charlie privately for 15 minutes, then spoke with Will and Tori separately. After nearly 2 hours, Ms. Moore gathered her notes and addressed them all in the living room. "Based on my initial assessment, I see no immediate cause for concern regarding Charlotte's welfare. The home is safe and appropriate. She has a consistent routine, and she appears well-adjusted despite her recent behavioral issues at school." Will felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. However, Ms. Moore continued, "There are some concerns about stability given the unusual circumstances." She glanced at Tori. "Ms. Ashford's presence, while not inappropriate in itself, introduces an element of unpredictability, especially given the media attention. There's also the matter of Charlotte's school suspension and reported withdrawal from peers following her mother's death." Rachel leaned forward slightly. "Are you suggesting that Mr. Harrison's parenting is inadequate because he's provided temporary housing to a friend in need, or because his daughter is processing grief in age-appropriate ways?" "I'm not suggesting anything at this point," Ms. Moore replied coolly. "I'm noting areas for further assessment." She turned to Will. "Mr. Harrison, I'll be scheduling a follow-up visit in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I'd like Charlotte to meet with our child psychologist for an evaluation." After Ms. Moore left, Rachel stayed behind to debrief. "That went as well as could be expected," she said, gathering her papers. Elaine Moore is thorough but fair. The fact that she didn't identify any immediate concerns is positive. But she's coming back, Will said, and she wants Charlie to see their psychologist. Standard procedure, Rachel assured him. Based on what I observed, I'd be very surprised if this investigation resulted in any action. It's clear that Charlie is well cared for and that your relationship with Ms. Ashford is appropriate. The next day brought two significant developments. First, Tori received and accepted a job offer from the Greenfield Foundation. Modest pay but meaningful work starting the following Monday. Second, Will received a disturbing call from Thomas Burke, Sarah's attorney. Well, I'm glad I caught you. There's been a development regarding Sarah's investment that you need to know about. What kind of development? Will asked, stepping into his office for privacy. I received a call from the CEO of Nexus Sustainable Solutions, the company that acquired GreenTech. They've been contacted by someone claiming the investment was made fraudulently. What? That's ridiculous. Sarah made that investment legitimately. I know that and they know that. All the paperwork is in order. But this individual is threatening a lengthy legal challenge that could tie up the funds indefinitely. Let me guess. Will said, a cold certainty settling in his stomach. Theodore Blackstone. How did you know? Lucky guess, Will said grimly. What does this mean for our funds? For now, nothing has changed. The money is still yours. But Nexus is understandably concerned about potential litigation. They're considering placing the funds in escrow until any legal questions are resolved. Which could take years, Will surmised. Potentially, yes. I'm fighting it, of course. The claim has no merit. But Blackstone has considerable resources and influence. He's creating doubt where none should exist. That evening, Will and Tori sat on the back porch after Charlie had gone to bed, the gravity of their situation settling over them. Theodore was attacking on all fronts: the DCF investigation, the challenge to Sarah's investment, the continuing pressure on Tori's family business. He seemed determined to reclaim Tori at any cost. He'll never stop, will he? Tori whispered, staring out at the half-cleared garden. Not until he gets what he wants, Mita. Will nodded grimly. You. Tori was quiet for a long moment, her expression shifting from shock to resignation to something harder, determination. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I need to confront him. What? No. That's exactly what he wants, to get you alone, to pressure you directly. Not alone, Tori clarified. I want you with me. But I need to look him in the eye, Will. I need him to hear directly from me that I'm never coming back, that no amount of manipulation or intimidation will change that. Will considered this. Rachel had advised against direct confrontation, but maybe she was thinking of him confronting Theodore. Tori was different. She was what Theodore wanted, what all this maneuvering was about. Perhaps a clear, definitive rejection from her was the only thing that would make him back off. Okay, he said finally, but we do it on our terms, not his. Neutral territory. Public enough that he won't make a scene, private enough for an honest conversation. They arranged to meet Theodore at the Four Seasons downtown the following evening. He agreed suspiciously quickly, which put Will on edge. When they arrived, Theodore was already waiting in a private dining room, sipping an expensive scotch with cold composure. Victoria, you're looking different. Tori's chin lifted slightly. I am different, Theodore. And Mr. Harrison, Theodore continued, ignoring her response. Still playing white knight to my runaway bride, Will kept his expression neutral. We're here to resolve this situation, Mr. Blackstone. Nothing more. Theodore's smile was razor sharp. I see what's happening here. You think you can play house with my fiancée and her money? But Victoria doesn't have any money of her own. Her trust fund is contingent on marriage and her parents' approval. Without me, she's nothing. Then it's a good thing I'm not with you for your money. Tori said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The conversation quickly deteriorated, with Theodore revealing the full extent of his vindictiveness. Let me be perfectly clear, he said, leaning forward with menace in his eyes. This ends one of two ways. Either Victoria returns to fulfill her obligations, or I will systematically dismantle everything you both care about. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Blackstone, Will said, keeping his voice steady despite the anger coursing through him. Not a threat, a business proposition. Theodore turned to Tori. Your father's company is on the verge of collapse. Your mother called me in tears yesterday. Your family legacy. Everything your father built will be gone within a month if this continues. He shifted his gaze to Will. And you, Harrison. The DCF investigation is just the beginning. How do you think Charlotte's teachers will react when they learn about your financial problems? When they hear rumors about your drinking? I don't have a drinking problem, Will said, genuinely confused. Theodore smiled thinly. You will by the time I'm done. It's remarkable what people will believe when the story comes from the right sources. The threat hung in the air between them, chilling in its quiet certainty. Will looked at Tori, saw the conflict in her eyes. The desire to protect her family, to protect Will and Charlie, warring with her newfound determination to live on her own terms. I need some air, she said, suddenly standing. I'll be right back. Before either man could respond, she had slipped out of the private dining room. Will started to follow, but Theodore's voice stopped him. Let her go, Harrison. She needs a moment to process the inevitable. 15 minutes passed with no sign of Tori. Will's concern mounted with each passing minute. When he tried to check on her, he couldn't find her anywhere in the restaurant. Then his phone rang. Charlie's school. Mr. Harrison. This is the school nurse. There's been an accident. Charlie fell during recess and hit her head. She's conscious but disoriented. We think she needs medical attention. Will's world narrowed to a pinpoint of terror. I'll be right there. He rushed to the school only to discover there had been no accident. The school didn't even have a nurse on duty that day. It had been a ruse to separate him from Tori. When he tried calling her phone, it went straight to voicemail. Back home, Will found Rachel waiting for him on the porch, her expression grave. Will we have a situation? Tori came to my office about an hour ago. She was upset, said she needed legal advice about her trust fund. Will felt a surge of hope. She's okay. She's safe. She was when I saw her, Rachel confirmed. But she was adamant about one thing. She's going back to Theodore. The hope died as quickly as it had flared. No, she wouldn't. Not after everything. She believes it's the only way to protect you and Charlie, Rachel said gently. And her family. Theodore's leverage is considerable, Will. Inside the envelope Rachel handed him was a letter written in Tori's elegant hand. Dear Will, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way back to Theodore's house. Please don't try to find me or change my mind. This is my choice, perhaps the first truly selfless choice I've ever made. Theodore will never stop. You saw that today? He'll destroy my family's company. He'll continue the DCF investigation, perhaps even fabricate evidence. He'll target your clients, your reputation, maybe even your ability to keep custody of Charlie. I can't let that happen. I won't actually marry him. I've negotiated that much. A long engagement, a public reconciliation, but no wedding date. In exchange, he'll drop everything against you and my family. It's the best deal I could make. Please tell Charlie I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye properly. Tell her I'll never forget our garden plans or her wonderful artwork. Tell her that sometimes loving people means making hard choices to keep them safe. And Will, these weeks with you and Charlie have been the most real, the most meaningful of my life. You helped me find myself again. No matter what happens next, I'll carry that with me always. Take care of each other. All my love, Tori. After Rachel left, Will sat on the porch for a long time reading and rereading Tori's letter. He understood her reasoning. It was the same protective instinct that had driven him to consider returning to his old firm when Theodore first began applying financial pressure. But the thought of Tori trapped with Theodore sacrificing her newfound independence to protect them was unbearable. That night, unable to sleep, Will pulled out Sarah's flash drive and plugged it into his laptop. If there was something here, some piece of information about Theodore or Green Tech, he had to find it. He had to help Tori. For hours, Will searched through Sarah's meticulously organized files. Medical records, financial documents, family photos, letters to Charlie to be opened at various ages. All deeply meaningful on a personal level, but nothing that explained her interest in Green Tech or suggested any connection to Theodore Blackstone. Will was about to give up when he noticed a folder he'd overlooked labeled simply Hope. Inside was a single document, a scanned copy of a nurse's incident report from the children's hospital where Sarah had worked. The report filed by Sarah 6 months before her diagnosis detailed an adverse reaction in a pediatric cancer patient following administration of a new experimental treatment. The treatment was identified by a code name, but at the bottom of the report was a notation, manufactured by Nexus Pharmaceutical Subsidiary Research Division of Green Tech Innovations. Will frowned, trying to understand the significance. Sarah had been concerned about a bad reaction to a Green Tech-connected treatment. Was that why she'd invested in the company, to become a shareholder? with access to more information. Remembering Sarah's meticulous nature, he checked the properties of the incident report file. It had been modified 2 weeks before her death, long after she'd stopped working due to her illness. Will's pulse quickened. Sarah had accessed this specific file near the end when she was putting her affairs in order. It must be significant. He examined the report more carefully, looking for anything unusual. The patient's name and identifying information had been redacted, standard procedure for medical documents, but there was a case number PTNX7742. On impulse, Will searched for this code on the flash drive and found a hidden folder that required a password. What would Sarah have used as a password? Will tried several combinations. Charlie's birthday, their anniversary, Sarah's favorite flower, all failed. Then he remembered what Sarah had written in her letter about the investment, always bet on smart women in tech. On a hunch, he typed "smart woman tech." The folder unlocked, revealing dozens of files, emails, research papers, clinical trial data, and photographs. As Will began reading, the blood drained from his face. What Sarah had discovered went far beyond a single adverse reaction. Green Tech, through its pharmaceutical subsidiary, had been conducting unauthorized clinical trials on terminally ill children, testing experimental treatments without proper oversight or fully informed consent. The documentation showed manipulated data, concealed side effects, and potentially falsified results. Sarah had been systematically gathering evidence for months, even as her own cancer progressed. But the most damning evidence was a series of emails between Theodore Blackstone and the research division head discussing the need to expedite results regardless of protocol concerns and manage regulatory obstacles through established channels. Theodore had been directly involved in pushing these experimental treatments to market, prioritizing profit over patient safety. One email was particularly chilling. After being informed of severe reactions in 3 pediatric patients, Theodore had written, "Acceptable collateral for the larger goal. Proceed as planned and manage the narrative." The final file in the folder was a letter addressed to Will, dated just days before Sarah's death. "Will, if you're reading this, it means 2 things. I'm gone, and you figured out why I made the green tech investment. I'm sorry for keeping this from you, but I needed to protect you and Charlie in case things went wrong. What I've uncovered about green tech and Theodore Blackstone is explosive. Children have been harmed. Laws have been broken. I've been gathering evidence for months, but my time is running out. I've sent copies of everything to my friend Rebecca Chen at the Medical Ethics Review Board with instructions to proceed only if the investment pays off significantly, a sign that the company's wrongdoing continues to be profitable. The substantial return will also give you the financial security to weather what might be a difficult fight. Theodore Blackstone is dangerous, Will. He has political connections, legal teams, and resources we can't imagine. But he can't be allowed to continue putting children at risk for profit. This is my last act as a nurse, as a mother, as someone who took an oath to do no harm. I trust you to do what's right with this information. All my love, Sarah. P.S. Contact Rebecca at the encrypted email address in the attached file. The password is Charlie's middle name plus the date we met." Will read the letter twice, tears streaming down his face. Even dying Sarah had been fighting for what was right, protecting children she would never meet. She had entrusted him with her final mission, believing he would have the courage to carry it forward. And in that moment, everything became clear. This was the leverage they needed against Theodore, not just to free Tori, but to stop him from harming more families, more children. Will quickly copied all the files to his computer and a separate backup drive. Then he composed an email to Rebecca Chen using the encrypted address and password Sarah had provided. He attached key documents and briefly explained the situation, including Theodore's threats against his family and Tori's forced reconciliation. As he was about to send the email, his phone rang. Unknown number. It was nearly 2 a.m. Who would call at this hour? "Hello, Will." Thank God. It was Tori, her voice a hushed whisper. "I don't have much time. Theodore's asleep, but his security monitors the house phones. I'm using one of the staff's phones." "Tori, are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "No, I'm fine. But Will, I found something about green tech and Theodore. There's a safe in his study with files about clinical trials, something called Project Nexus. I couldn't get it open, but I heard him talking to someone about containing the Sarah Harrison situation and ensuring all copies of the research are secured." Will's heart raced. "I found it, Tori. Sarah's research. It's all here evidence that Theodore was involved in unauthorized clinical trials on children. Falsified data, hidden side effects, everything. Sarah was building a case against him when she died. That's why he's been so desperate, Tori breathed. Not just about me, but about making sure you never access those files. Exactly. I've just contacted Sarah's colleague at the Medical Ethics Review Board. This is our leverage, Tori. With this evidence, will listen to me. Tori cut in, her voice urgent. Theodore has a meeting tomorrow with the Green Tech Board. I overheard him on the phone. He's planning to authorize destruction of all trial data related to Project Nexus. He's panicking, Will. When is the meeting? 9 a.m. at Green Tech headquarters in the city. We'll check the time, just after 2 a.m. Less than 7 hours to act. We need to move fast. Can you get out of there? Not easily. The house is guarded and Theodore has some kind of security system on the bedroom door. I only managed to slip out because he took a sleeping pill after drinking too much at dinner. Tori paused, then continued with newfound determination. But I'll find a way. This is bigger than me now, bigger than all of us. Those were children, Will. Sick children. I know. Will's resolve hardened. Here's what we'll do. I'll contact Rebecca Chen, immediately have her bring the Medical Ethics Board and hopefully law enforcement to the Green Tech meeting. You focus on getting safely away from Theodore. I'll try, but we'll be careful. Theodore has people everywhere. If he realizes you have Sarah's research, I understand the risk. But Sarah trusted me to finish what she started, and I won't let her down. He hesitated, then added softly, I won't let you down either, Tori. I know you won't. There was a pause, then a muffled sound of alarm. Someone's coming. I have to go. Tori, wait. The line went dead. Will stared at the phone for a moment, fear and determination warring within him. Then he turned back to his computer and pressed send on the email to Rebecca Chen, setting in motion what Sarah had prepared for years ago. The next morning, Will arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez to watch Charlie and drove to the Green Tech headquarters downtown, a sleek glass and steel building that projected innovation and environmental consciousness. Rebecca Chen had responded to his email with remarkable efficiency, escalating Sarah's evidence to both the Medical Ethics Review Board and federal authorities. Will watched from his car as black SUVs with government plates arrived at the building. At precisely 8:55 a.m., Theodore's Bentley pulled up to the entrance. He emerged immaculately dressed as always, his expression confident as he strode toward the doors. There was no sign of Tori. Will's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where was she? Had she managed to get away from the house? Or had Theodore discovered her midnight phone call and done something to prevent her from interfering with his plans, before he could decide whether to text her? A commotion at the building entrance caught his attention. Even from a distance, Will could see federal agents approaching Theodore, credentials displayed. One appeared to be reading him his rights. Theodore's face contorted with rage. He gestured angrily, pointing back toward the street directly at Will's car. Somehow he had spotted Will watching. Even as the authorities attempted to escort him inside, Theodore broke away and began striding toward the street, his expression murderous. Will stepped out of his car just as Theodore reached the sidewalk. For a moment, they stood facing each other, the physical distance between them a fraction of the moral gulf that separated them. You, Theodore snarled, his polished veneer completely stripped away. You did this. You and your dead wife. No? Theodore Will replied calmly. You did this when you decided that profit was worth more than children's lives. When you thought your money and power put you above the law. Theodore's laugh was ugly, unhinged. You have no idea what you've done. The lives you've destroyed, the treatments that will never reach the market because of this hysteria. Treatments that were hurting children. That were being tested without proper protocols or informed consent. Acceptable collateral. Theodore spat, echoing his own damning email. For every breakthrough in medical history, sacrifices were made. Progress has a price. Not this price, Will said firmly. Never this price. The authorities caught up to Theodore, now two agents flanking him with stern expressions. Mr. Blackstone, you need to come with us now. There's a warrant for your arrest related to violations of FDA regulations, fraud, and potentially criminal negligence. Theodore ignored them, his gaze still fixed on Will. This isn't over, Harrison. Not by a long shot. I have resources you can't imagine, connections in places you've never heard of. You think a few federal charges will stop me? He smiled, a terrible, empty expression. I'll be out by dinner, and then I'll show you what real power looks like." As the agents led Theodore away, his final threat hung in the air like a thundercloud. Wilton knew it wasn't an idle boast. Men like Theodore often did have connections that could minimize consequences, delay justice, perhaps even avoid it entirely. But something had shifted in the balance of power between them. Theodore was no longer the untouchable titan controlling all the pieces on the board. He was a man facing serious federal charges, his reputation and freedom at risk. For the first time, he was vulnerable. Will was about to return to his car when he heard someone calling his name. He turned to see a woman hurrying toward him mid-50s with short gray hair and intelligent eyes behind simple glasses. "Will Harrison, I'm Rebecca Chen, Sarah's colleague." She extended her hand, which Will shook gratefully. "I can't believe you found her research after all this time. We thought it was lost when she died." "She hid it well," Will acknowledged. "I only discovered it by accident when Theodore began interfering with the investment funds." Rebecca nodded, her expression somber. Sarah was incredibly thorough. "The evidence she gathered, it's damning, Will. Not just for Theodore personally, but for the entire research division at GreenTech. The FDA has already ordered a halt to all their clinical trials pending a full investigation." Will felt a surge of pride in his late wife's work. That's what she would have wanted, to protect other children from what she was seeing. "She was a remarkable woman," Rebecca said softly. "She knew she was dying, but she kept gathering evidence, kept building the case. She wanted to make sure it would be strong enough when the time came." They were interrupted by Will's phone ringing. Robert Ashford, Tori's father. "Victoria's gone missing," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "She wasn't in her room this morning, and Theodore's security team can't find her anywhere on the property." Will's heart leaped. Maybe she'd escaped on her own after all. "Did you check the garage? Is any car missing?" "That's just it. No vehicles are missing, and the security footage doesn't show her leaving." "It's like she vanished." Robert's voice dropped lower. "There's more. Theodore called from police custody about 20 minutes ago, absolutely livid. He instructed his head of security to secure all packages and prepare for immediate relocation. I think he means Victoria will. I think he's planning to take her somewhere once he's released." Will's mind raced. If Theodore was planning to flee once he made bail, the yacht would be a logical escape route. International waters, then perhaps to a country with limited extradition agreements with the United States. "Robert, listen carefully," Will said urgently. "Contact the authorities immediately. Tell them everything you just told me about Theodore's instructions. Then stay at the house in case Tori returns or tries to contact you." "What are you going to do, find Tori?" Will drove to Greenwich Harbor, where he spotted Theodore's gleaming white superyacht immediately dwarfing the surrounding boats. Even from a distance, Will could see crew members moving purposefully about the deck preparing for departure. As he approached the dock where the yacht was moored, he could see two men in casual but expensive clothing guarding the gangway, Theodore's security, not regular crew. "Can we help you, sir?" one of them asked, his tone polite but firm. Will opted for the direct approach. "I'm looking for Victoria Ashford. I believe she's on board." The guards exchanged glances. "There's no one by that name here, sir. This is a private vessel. I'll have to ask you to leave the dock." Will stood his ground. "I know this is Theodore Blackstone's yacht. I know he's been arrested this morning. And I know Victoria Ashford is either on this boat or being brought here. Federal agents are on their way to secure this vessel. If you're holding her against her will, you'll be facing serious charges." The first guard's hand moved toward the inside of his jacket, reaching for a weapon. Will realized with a jolt of fear. But before he could draw it, a voice called out from the yacht's upper deck. "We stop." Will looked up to see Tori leaning over the railing, her expression frantic. She was dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, clothes for traveling. Not the elegant dress she'd worn at Theodore's dinner party. "Tori, are you okay? Are you being held here?" "No, I just wait there. I'm coming down." As she descended the gangway, Will noticed something odd about her movements, a stiffness, a caution that suggested she wasn't entirely free. When she reached the dock, she walked directly to him, but stopped short of embracing him, maintaining a careful distance. "You shouldn't be here," Will, she said, her voice low and strained. "You need to leave now, not without you," Will replied, studying her face. Something was wrong. Her eyes kept darting to the yacht, and there was a tension in her posture that spoke of fear rather than relief at seeing him. A new voice interrupted them, smooth-cultured, with the faintest hint of an accent Will couldn't place. Ms. Ashford, perhaps you should introduce us to your friend. Will turned to see a man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a casual but obviously expensive sailing outfit, descending the gangway. Though he'd never seen the man before, something about his bearing the cold assessment in his eyes reminded Will forcibly of Theodore. Mr. Harrison, I presume, the man said, confirming he knew exactly who Will was. I've heard a great deal about you. My son can be quite verbose when he's upset. Son. This was Theodore's father, the patriarch of the Blackstone Empire. The resemblance was subtle but unmistakable now that Will knew to look for it. Mr. Blackstone, Will acknowledged, understanding now why Tori had been so anxious for him to leave. Theodore's resources extended far beyond himself. His family, his connections, his empire were all formidable in their own right. Please call me Edward, the older man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're all friends here, aren't we? He turned to Tori. Victoria has been telling me all about your situation. Such a shame about Theodore's impetuousness. He never did learn patience. Will looked at Tori questioningly. She seemed to be silently pleading with him, though whether to leave or to stay, he couldn't tell. Victoria came to us early this morning, Edward continued smoothly, quite distraught about Theodore's behavior. We were just discussing how best to resolve this unfortunate situation when you arrived. The situation is being resolved by the authorities, Will said carefully. Theodore has been arrested for serious violations of FDA regulations, fraud, and potentially criminal negligence. Edward waved a dismissive hand. Misunderstandings and overzealous regulators. It will all be sorted out. These things always are. His smile tightened slightly. Though I must admit your late wife's evidence has created quite a complication. Police cars and FBI vehicles were pulling up to the harbor entrance. Now officers and agents emerging with purpose. Edward watched them approach, his expression hardening. This isn't over, he said quietly. The Blackstone family has weathered greater storms than this. In a month, a year, when the media circus has moved on, when the prosecutors have been reassigned, when the political winds have shifted, we'll still be here. And we'll remember who stood against us. Then remember this too, Will said, stepping forward to stand beside Tori. Sarah Harrison wasn't the only one gathering evidence. Tori's been documenting everything since she left Theodore, the threats, the manipulation, the DCF complaint, everything. He met Edward's gaze steadily. Your family may have money and power, but we have the truth. And sometimes that's enough. Edward held Will's gaze for a long moment, something like grudging respect flickering in his eyes. Then he turned and ascended the gangway without another word, disappearing into the yacht's interior as FBI agents approached the dock. Tori's hand found Will's, gripping it tightly. I'm sorry I scared you, she said softly. When I overheard Theodore's father was coming to the house, I knew I had to follow him to see what they were planning. I couldn't risk contacting you until I was sure. Will squeezed her hand, relief washing over him. You were incredibly brave, Tori, and a little reckless. She smiled weakly. I learned from the best, a widow who took in a runaway bride, standing up to a billionaire to protect her daughter. That's pretty much the definition of brave and reckless. As the federal agents reached them, beginning the process of securing the yacht and questioning them about Theodore and Edward's plans, Will felt something settle within him, a certainty that had been building since the night he found Tori on that snowy road. Whatever came next, the investigations, the potential trials, the inevitable counterattacks from the Blackstone Empire, they would face it together. Not because Tori needed rescuing or because Will needed saving, but because they had both found in each other the courage to stand for what mattered most. And in that moment, Will knew with absolute clarity what Sarah had meant in her final letter, that love isn't about replacing what you've lost, but about finding room in your heart for something new, something that helps you grow into who you're meant to be. The 3 weeks following Theodore's arrest passed in a blur of activity. Federal investigators came and went from Will's house, interviewing him repeatedly about Sarah's research and his interactions with Theodore. Rachel became a near constant presence, shepherding them through the legal complexities and fending off the inevitable media attention that followed the arrest of a prominent billionaire. Tori began her job at the Greenfield Foundation, throwing herself into her work with a passion that impressed her new colleagues. Each evening she'd return home, for it was truly becoming her home now, bubbling with ideas for community garden projects, environmental education initiatives, and sustainable urban planning campaigns. The garden behind the house flourished under their combined care. Charlie, Will, and Tori spent weekends planting, weeding, and nurturing what Charlie proudly called their family project. Sarah's old flower beds now burst with color, cosmos, zinnias, and her beloved roses blooming alongside tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. It was different from the garden Sarah had created, but no less beautiful, a living symbol of their new beginning. One warm Saturday in early May, they were all working in the garden when Rachel's car pulled into the driveway. Will straightened, wiping dirt from his hands onto his jeans as she approached, her expression unreadable behind oversized sunglasses. "Please tell me you're here to get your hands dirty, not to deliver more legal paperwork," Will called in greeting. Rachel smiled, but there was a tension in it that immediately put Will on alert. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk privately for a few minutes." Will looked at Tori, who nodded in understanding. "Charlie and I will keep working. We've got peas to stake, right, kiddo?" Charlie, her small hands encased in pink gardening gloves 2 sizes too big, nodded solemnly. "Dad's not very good at staking anyway. He makes them all crooked." Will feigned offense, grateful for the moment of lightness. "Well, if my services aren't appreciated here, I guess I'd better go talk to Rachel." Inside, Rachel declined his offer of coffee, a sign that whatever she had to say wouldn't take long. She set her array case on the kitchen table and removed a folder. "I just came from a meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office. There have been some developments in Theodore's case." Will's stomach tightened. What kind of developments? Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Theodore's legal team is pushing for a plea deal. They want to avoid a public trial at all costs." "That makes sense," Will said. "The evidence is damning and a trial would air all their dirty laundry." "Exactly. But here's where it gets complicated." Rachel opened the folder, revealing a stack of legal documents. "The deal they're proposing includes significant financial penalties for green tech, a restructuring of their pharmaceutical division, and enhanced oversight of all their clinical trials." "All of which sounds appropriate," Will noted, sensing there was more. "Yes, but in exchange they want full immunity for Theodore personally. He steps down as CEO, pays a fine that's essentially pocket change for him, and walks away without criminal charges or jail time." Will felt a surge of anger. "After what he did to those children? After everything he did to try to silence us? No way." Rachel nodded grimly. "That was my reaction too. But the prosecutors are considering it. Green tech employs thousands of people. A long, messy trial could tank the company's stock, leading to massive layoffs. Plus, the Blackstone family has connections in Washington. There's pressure from above, so they're just going to let him get away with it." Will stood and paced the kitchen, unable to contain his frustration. "What about Sarah's work? What about justice for those families?" "That's why I'm here, Will." Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. "The U.S. attorney wants to speak with you and Tori. They need to understand what Theodore did on a personal level, the threats, the manipulation, the lengths he went to in order to cover up his crimes." Will stopped pacing. "When tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock at their office downtown. I'll be there." Will's resolve was absolute, and Tori will too, I'm sure. "There's one more thing." Rachel hesitated. "The prosecutors have been in contact with some of the families whose children were part of the unauthorized trials. 3 of them want to meet you, to thank you and Tori for bringing this to light, and to thank Sarah through you." Will's throat tightened with emotion. He hadn't considered this aspect, that Sarah's work continued through him, and Tori had given these families answers they might never have had otherwise. "Yes, of course. I'd be honored to meet them." After Rachel left, Will found Tori and Charlie still working in the garden. Charlie chattering away about her plan to grow pumpkins big enough to make a real princess carriage for Halloween. He watched them for a moment, struck by how natural they looked together. Tori patiently showing Charlie how to tie the pea vines to the stakes, their heads bent close in concentration. The DCF investigation had been closed the previous week, the caseworker concluding that Charlie was thriving in a stable, nurturing environment with appropriate adult guidance. The woman had even commented on the positive impact of the gardening project, noting in her report that it provided valuable bonding time and life skills development. Will cleared his throat, and they both looked up, smiling at him with identical expressions of contentment. "Everything okay with Rachel?" Tori asked, standing and brushing dirt from her knees. Will nodded. "Just some updates on Theodore's case. I'll fill you in later." He turned to Charlie. "How about ice cream? I think we've all earned a treat." Charlie's eyes lit up. "Can we go to Molly's? They have the sprinkle cones. Is there any other place worth going?" Will asked with mock seriousness. As they drove to the ice cream shop in town, Charlie dominating the conversation from the back seat with detailed descriptions of her school art project, Will reached over and squeezed Tori's hand. Their eyes met briefly, a world of understanding passing between them. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought with the prosecutors and the families, they would face them together. The next morning, they drove to the federal building in downtown Greenwich, both dressed in simple professional attire. Will had explained the situation to Tori the night before after Charlie was asleep. They want to offer Theodore a deal, he had said, his voice tight with controlled anger. No jail time, just a fine and stepping down as CEO. Tori had been quiet for a long moment, processing this. Part of me wants to see him punished, truly punished, for what he did, she'd finally said. But another part just wants this to be over, to move forward, without him casting a shadow over our lives. Will had understood completely. The desire for justice warring with the desire for peace, for closure. Now as they sat side by side in the U.S. Attorney's sleek conference room, that same conflict played across Tori's features. 5 people sat across from them, 3 assistant U.S. attorneys, an FBI agent, and a representative from the FDA. Ms. Ashford, Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming in today, the lead prosecutor began. I'm Claire Donovan, assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. We've reviewed Ms. Kim's submissions regarding your personal experiences with Theodore Blackstone, as well as the extraordinary research compiled by the late Sarah Harrison. Will nodded, feeling a surge of pride at the mention of Sarah's work. What we'd like to understand better is the extent of Mr. Blackstone's personal involvement in both the clinical trial irregularities and the subsequent cover-up attempts. Claire Donovan's gaze was sharp, assessing. Particularly any direct threats or coercive actions he took against either of you. For the next 2 hours, Will and Tori took turns describing their experiences with Theodore, from Tori's gradual recognition of his controlling nature to her flight from the wedding to the systematic campaign of intimidation that followed. Will detailed the financial pressure, the DCF investigation, and Theodore's explicit threats at the Four Seasons. The attorneys took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting them speak uninterrupted. When they finished, Claire Donovan sat back, her expression thoughtful. This is extremely helpful, she said, and it aligns with what we've heard from other witnesses, including several former Green Tech employees who've come forward since the arrest. Will leaned forward slightly. Does this change anything about the plea deal? Donovan exchanged glances with her colleagues. We're still evaluating our options. The Blackstone legal team is exerting significant pressure, and there are broader considerations at play. Will felt his frustration rising, those broader considerations being Theodore's connections and money. Ms. Donovan Tori spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. I understand the pragmatic arguments for a deal, but there's something you should know about Theodore. She folded her hands on the table, her knuckles white with tension. He doesn't believe rules apply to him. If he walks away from this without meaningful consequences, he'll see it as confirmation of that belief. And he'll do it again, maybe not clinical trials, but something else where vulnerable people get hurt for his profit. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. The FDA representative, who had been mostly quiet, cleared his throat. Ms. Ashford makes an important point, he said. We've seen this pattern before with corporate defendants who receive what amounts to a slap on the wrist. The recidivism rate is concerning. Claire Donovan nodded slowly. We'll take this into consideration. And for what it's worth, I agree with your assessment of Mr. Blackstone's character. She gathered her papers, signaling the end of the meeting. Thank you both for coming in today. We'll be in touch through Ms. Kim as the case progresses. Outside the federal building, Will and Tori stood for a moment on the steps, blinking in the bright May sunshine. Despite the uncertainty about Theodore's fate, Will felt lighter somehow, as if the simple act of telling their story to people with the power to act had lifted a weight from his shoulders. Ready to meet the families? He asked Tori, checking his watch. She nodded, her expression a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. I think so. It's just, what do you say to people who've been through something like that, whose children were used as test subjects? Will took her hand, squeezing it gently. We listen. That's probably what they need most, someone to hear them, to acknowledge what happened to their children. They'd arranged to meet the families at a quiet cafe a few blocks from the federal building. As they approached, Will saw 3 sets of parents already seated at a large corner table, 2 couples and a single mother, all watching the door with expectant expressions. The introductions were awkward at first, the weight of shared trauma creating a barrier that none of them quite knew how to breach. But as they settled around the table with coffee and pastries, the conversation gradually found its rhythm. James was 9 when they enrolled him in the trial. One father said, his voice steady, but his eyes reflecting old pain. The conventional treatments weren't working, and GreenTech's program seemed like our last hope. They promised groundbreaking results, minimal side effects. What they didn't tell us was that the treatment hadn't completed standard safety protocols. My Lily was 7, the single mother added. She suffered seizures after the 3rd treatment. When I questioned the doctors, they insisted it wasn't related to the trial drug. She looked down at her coffee cup. I knew they were lying, but I had no proof. And Lily was so sick I couldn't fight them and take care of her at the same time. The 3rd couple, older than the others, sat holding hands with white-knuckled grips. Our son Michael didn't survive the trial, the woman said quietly. He was 12. The official cause was listed as complications from his original condition, but he was stable before the trial started. His body just shut down after the 4th treatment. Will felt a deep ache in his chest for these parents, for their children. For Sarah, who had seen what was happening and fought to expose it, even as her own body was failing her. "I'm so sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate, but needing to say them anyway. Sarah would be too. She believed every child deserved proper care, proper protocols. That's why she started gathering evidence. How did she know? The first father asked. Was she part of the medical team? Will shook his head. She was a nurse at the children's hospital where some of the trials were conducted. She noticed patterns in the adverse reactions, started documenting them. When she realized what was happening, she invested in GreenTech to gain shareholder access to internal documents. Even knowing she was dying, the single mother asked, her eyes wide. Especially then, I think, Will said. She knew she had limited time to build the case. The older woman who'd lost her son reached across the table and took Will's hand in a gesture of surprising intimacy. "Thank you," she said simply. "And please thank Ms. Ashford for her courage in standing up to Theodore Blackstone. We tried for years to get someone to listen to us about what happened to our children. No one would touch it. The Blackstone name was too powerful." Tori, who had been mostly quiet, spoke up. "I wish I'd known sooner about the trials, about Theodore's involvement. I was blind to so much while I was with him." "You got away," the single mother said firmly. "That's what matters, and you helped bring this to light. Now finally someone is listening to us." As the conversation continued, Will was struck by the resilience of these parents, how they had channeled their grief and anger into advocacy, forming a support group for families affected by unethical clinical trials and pushing for stronger oversight of pediatric research. "We're not against medical advancement," the first father explained. "God knows we wanted a cure for James, but not at the cost of informed consent, not through deception and corner cutting." By the time they parted ways 2 hours later, exchanging contact information and promises to stay in touch, Will felt both emotionally drained and oddly fortified. These families had suffered unimaginable loss and betrayal, yet they had transformed their pain into purpose. It reminded him of Sarah, of her quiet determination to protect children she would never meet. "That's why we can't let Theodore walk away with just a fine," he said to Tori as they drove home. "For these families, for their children, for Sarah." Tori nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll fight it, whatever it takes." The following week brought unexpected developments. First, Rachel called with news that Theodore's father, Edward Blackstone, had suffered a severe stroke and was in critical condition at New York Presbyterian Hospital. The family had closed ranks, canceling all scheduled legal meetings and requesting privacy. Then 3 days later, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced they were rejecting the proposed plea deal and proceeding with a full slate of charges against Theodore, including fraud, conspiracy, and criminal negligence. If convicted on all counts, he faced up to 20 years in federal prison. The prosecutors didn't say why they'd changed course, but Rachel had her theories. "The evidence you and the families provided was compelling," she told Will and Tori over dinner at their house. But what really tipped the scales was the internal chaos at Blackstone Industries after Edward's stroke. With the patriarch incapacitated, the various family factions are jockeying for control. Theodore's cousins on the board voted to withdraw the company's support for his legal defense. In other words, Will said he lost his safety net. Exactly. Without his father's influence and the family's united front, Theodore is just another rich defendant with good lawyers, formidable but not invincible. The news brought a measure of relief but not closure. Theodore was still fighting the charges, and the legal process would likely drag on for months, if not years. But the immediate pressure, the sense of being constantly under threat, had eased. Life settled into a new normal. Tori's job at the Greenfield Foundation evolved from a simple marketing role to leading their community engagement initiatives with a focus on urban gardening projects in underserved neighborhoods. Will's consulting business stabilized as he found his niche advising small business owners who valued his personal approach over automated AI solutions. And Charlie thrived, her school performance improving and her natural exuberance returning in full force. The three of them fell into comfortable routines: Sunday pancake breakfast, weeknight homework sessions at the kitchen table, weekend gardening when weather permitted. They celebrated small victories: Charlie's successful science project on plant growth, Tori's first major grant for a community garden in a local housing project, Will landing a significant new client who specifically sought out his human-centered approach. One evening in late June, as the sun was setting over their now flourishing garden, Will found Tori sitting on the back porch steps, a glass of wine in hand, gazing thoughtfully at the riot of colors and textures they'd created together. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her. Tori smiled, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about that night you found me on the road. How lost I felt. How certain that I destroyed everything." She took a sip of her wine. "I could never have imagined ending up here like this." Will nodded, understanding completely. Life has a way of surprising us. After Sarah died, I thought that was it for me, that I'd just go through the motions for Charlie's sake until she was grown. He looked out at the garden, at the roses that Sarah had loved now blooming alongside the vegetables Tori had chosen. "I never expected to find this, whatever this is." Tori turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "What is this Will us, I mean? We've been so caught up in Theodore and the case and just getting through each day that we've never really defined it." Will considered her question carefully. In truth, he'd been turning it over in his own mind for weeks now. The easy answer was that they were friends, housemates, co-parents to Charlie in a sense. But that didn't begin to capture the depth of what had grown between them, a connection forged through shared struggles and small joys, through late-night conversations and early morning coffee, through standing together against forces that would have overwhelmed them individually. "I think," he said slowly, "it's the beginning of something. Something real and lasting if we want it to be." "And do you want it to be?" Will met her gaze directly. "Yes, very much." Tori's smile was luminous in the fading light. "So do I." The moment was interrupted by Charlie bursting through the back door, still in her pajamas despite the impending bedtime. "Dad." "Tori." "I finished my drawing of our garden for art class." She thrust a paper at them proudly. "I put in all the flowers and vegetables and us and even that butterfly that keeps coming back every day." Will examined the drawing, impressed by the level of detail. Charlie had captured not just the physical layout of the garden, but somehow its spirit as well, the sense of life and growth that permeated the space. "It's beautiful," Tori said, admiring the artwork. "I especially love how you drew the sunflowers following the sun." Charlie beamed at the praise. "Ms. Peterson says we should draw things that make us happy. And our garden makes me really happy." She hesitated, then added with the direct honesty of childhood, "You make me happy too, Tori. I'm glad you didn't go back to that mean man." Will felt his chest tighten with a mixture of love and pride for his daughter's emotional intelligence, her capacity for joy despite the losses she'd experienced. Tori visibly moved, opened her arms, and Charlie climbed into her lap without hesitation. "I'm glad too, Charlie. So very glad." Over Charlie's head, Tori's eyes met Will's, conveying more than words could express. In that moment, Will knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, Theodore's trial, the inevitable ups and downs of building a blended family, the ordinary struggles of daily life, they would face them together, drawing strength from the bonds they'd forged. Later that night, after Charlie was asleep, Will found himself drawn to Sarah's photograph on the mantel. It had been there since they moved into the house, a beautiful image of her in the garden, laughing at something off camera. He picked it up, studying the familiar features of the woman he had loved and lost. "I think you'd approve," he said softly to the photograph, "of Tori, of what we're building here. You always said life was for living, not just enduring." He felt no guilt in that moment, no sense of betraying Sarah's memory by opening his heart to Tori. Instead, there was only gratitude for the years he'd had with Sarah for her final gift that had protected them from Theodore for the chance to love again. Will placed the photograph back on the mantel and went to find Tori, who was curled up on the couch with a book about urban gardening initiatives. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting beside her. "Charlie's school year ends next week. What if we took a trip, the three of us? Maybe to that coastal town Sarah and I used to visit, the one with the famous botanical gardens I told you about." Tori looked up, surprised but pleased. "That sounds wonderful. But are you sure that place holds so many memories for you and Sarah?" Will nodded, certain of his answer. "That's precisely why I want to go, to honor those memories while making new ones with you and Charlie. Sarah would have wanted that for us to keep living, keep growing." Tori set aside her book and took his hand. "Then let's do it. A family vacation sounds perfect." Family, the word settled between them, natural and right. Not replacing what had been lost, but building something new alongside it. A garden with room for grief and joy, memory, and hope, past and future intertwined. 3 months later, on a perfect September afternoon, Charlie ran into the kitchen with a piece of paper clutched in her small hands. "I finished it," she announced, holding up her latest artwork. It was a drawing of their family, Will, Tori, and Charlie, standing in front of their house with the garden in full bloom. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My family is growing." Tori felt tears prick her eyes as she studied the drawing. In it, she wasn't trying to replace anyone or be anyone other than herself. She was simply part of something beautiful and real. "Can we hang it on the refrigerator?" Charlie asked. "Of course," Will said, taking the drawing from her hands. "It's perfect." As he hung the picture next to the others, Charlie's artwork, family photos, grocery lists, and all the small domestic details that made up their life, Tori felt something settle in her chest. Not the desperate need to be perfect or to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be, but a quiet sense of belonging. "I have something to tell you both," she said, her voice steady and sure. Will and Charlie turned to look at her, and she saw on their faces the same love and acceptance she'd been searching for her entire life. "I've been thinking about what Charlie said about families growing," she continued, "and I've decided I'd like to grow with yours if you'll have me." Will's smile was radiant. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I want to plant gardens with you every spring and listen to Charlie's stories and build something real together. I want to choose this life, not because I have to, but because I want to." Charlie whooped with joy and launched herself into Tori's arms, nearly knocking her over in her enthusiasm. Will wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they stood there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, the drawings on the refrigerator, the coffee mugs in the sink, the view of their garden through the window. "Welcome home," Will whispered against Tori's hair. Outside, the garden they'd planted together was in full bloom, a testament to the patience and care required to grow something beautiful. And inside, 3 people who had all known loss and loneliness had found each other and chosen to build something new, rooted in choice and tended with love. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something better, a real beginning. 3 days later, Will's phone rang with a call from Rachel. The news was unexpected, but somehow fitting. Theodore Blackstone had accepted a plea deal after all, but a very different one from what he'd initially sought. He would serve 5 years in a federal prison, pay substantial restitution to the affected families, and be permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. "What changed?" Will asked, surprised by Theodore's capitulation. Rachel's laugh held a note of satisfaction. "His father died yesterday. Without Edward's protection and connections, Theodore's position became untenable. The family board voted to distance Blackstone Industries from him, completely preserving the company by sacrificing Theodore. It was over. Truly over. Theodore would face consequences for his actions, the affected families would receive acknowledgement and compensation, and Sarah's final mission was complete. That night, Will, Tori, and Charlie stood together in the garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across the flourishing plants. Charlie darted among the flowers, chasing the last butterflies of the day, while Will and Tori watched their hands intertwined. "So that's it," Tori said quietly. "The final chapter of Theodore Blackstone in our lives." Will nodded, feeling a profound sense of closure. Sarah would be proud. Of all of us. Tori leaned her head against his shoulder, watching Charlie's joyful exploration of the garden. Not an ending, she said, a beginning. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Will knew she was right. What they had built together, this family, this home, this life, was not defined by what they had overcome, but by what they had chosen to create. The garden would go dormant soon as autumn deepened into winter, the plants retreating into themselves to wait out the cold. But beneath the surface, roots would strengthen, preparing for spring's inevitable return. Life, like love, had its seasons, and with patience and care, both would bloom again and again, each time different, each time beautiful in its own way. Charlie came running back to them, breathless with excitement. Dad, Tori, I found a caterpillar. Can we keep it? Please, I want to watch it turn into a butterfly. Will and Tori exchanged amused glances, recognizing the perfect metaphor for their own transformation. From a chance encounter on a snowy road to a family bound by choice rather than obligation. From a runaway bride and a grieving widower to two people who had found in each other the courage to begin again. Sure, kiddo, Will said, ruffling Charlie's hair. Some things are worth watching grow.